We're good. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Independent City Council meeting. It's Tuesday, February 27th, 2024. Let the record show that all the councilors are here, and thank you. In your packets, you have the minutes of the February 13th, 2024 meeting. And do they meet with your approval?
Move to approve, Mayor.
I have a motion.
I would like a change in the minutes, please. I would like the minutes to reflect that I did abstain from the vote for the $10 million water plant, not that I intended to abstain.
Okay. You okay with that, Councilor?
Yes.
Thank you. I need a second, please.
Second.
Second by Schwartzler. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, motion carries. Thank you very much. There are going to be a couple of changes to the agenda tonight. We're going to dispense with the city manager report and also with the staff presentation. We're going to have Fred talk about things at a future meeting because we have a full house and we have a lot of things to do. So we're going to make sure that we are respectful of everybody's time and efforts, and we're going to be here. So we're going to go to visitor comments. I want to remind everybody that this is visitor general comments. I know several of you are going to be testifying related to some public hearings later on, so we'll get to you. So under visitor comments, it's a 3 minutes. You're welcome to share what you'd like to with 3 minutes. Remember, it's a one-way conversation. You're speaking to us and we're listening to you, and we don't do a back and forth, but I just want you to know that, okay? So first person up for visitor comments is John Thomas. Good evening and welcome to council.
Hi. My concern is Pacific Power billing and what's going on. We've got a 21% mid-2023 increase in power. The first of the year, we got 12.9%. There's a proposed 17% for January 125. If they're asking PUC, that's 51% in 2 years. The City of Independence charges a franchise fee of 3% on the bill to use this city easements and right-of-ways and whatever. Why am I here? I cannot sustain a 50% electric power rate increase. That's usurious at this point in time. I have natural gas heat stove. I was getting an inline gas water heating. The Democratic leader wants no LNG use in a decade. I might live that long. What I object to the most is punitive damages awarded to punish Pacific Power for having energized fire lines when a federal fire trespasses on private land and burns those lines, trees over them. And now, since you can't sue the executive, the federal executive, the administrators of federal government are tort liability immune. There's no path except your insurance, which is now being denied anyone who lives or builds anywhere near federal lands, forest lands. Except there's a loophole. You can find that the power lines were energized, or somehow the power lines failed, or somebody had shot up a transformer, whatever. That's called inverse condemnation. You'd have to provide no proof of negligence or guilt. You own the power line, the fire started, the Forest Service tree fell across your fire line from a 15-foot wide right-of-way that was established 100 years ago under the Rural Electrification Acts. You're liable. So there's a fire over in Tillamook County or Lincoln County, Echo Fire, 22 houses, maybe mostly mobile homes and manufactured homes that couldn't be moved because they're so old and zoning won't let them be moved anymore. In court, they got $4.3 million, and then $19 million of punitive damages was levied against Pacific Power, my power provider at 246 B Street in Independence. Punitive damages are taken 70% off the top by the state of Oregon. Kate Brown famously said, victims do not deserve a windfall profit from punitive damages. They're to punish. I got it. Punish Pacific Power and Light, not me. If they can transfer their billings to my bill. Am I done?
That was the time. If you have, since you have written material, if you want to leave it with Karen, she can make sure that we include that. Thank you.
Well, you know the crux of my concern.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, we're moving forward here. I don't have any other public comments. At this point, under mail report here, I have a couple of board and commission applications for Jeff Myers and Barbara Cronin. Also, council members, at your table last night at the Historic Preservation Committee, we had two members who were going out of town. Both let us know that they were going to. And so there's also an application at your desk for Miranda Garrison for position number 6. And I suggest that we approve all 3 of those to the appropriate commissions.
I have a question, Mayor.
Yeah.
I know somebody's provided an application for the library board on Friday, and that's not in our packet.
Yeah, I know that one was coming in. There were a lot of things that came in at once, but I do plan to move that one forward in the next meeting.
Thank you.
I have an issue that these people just resigned last night in a very sounds like aggressive historic society meeting. How is it we're gonna get the best candidates to fill these spots if we have one day to review the applications? And I think in the future, maybe it's a good idea that all applications go before the council instead of through just one person, so that we can actually pick the best person for these jobs instead of these just rushing through and getting the same old at these committees. I think diversity of thought and diversity of opinion is important in all of them.
I agree with Councilor Roden. Other cities do institute an interview process. I share the same concern.
How did they know that there were openings that fast?
Well, I know that Miranda's was coming in and just finally got here. And I know Jeff Myers was coming in and finally just got here. And then Barbara Cronin, that was one that worked on. We have not had a plethora of applications for commissions.
But there have been other people who haven't been for, because for some reason their applications haven't been through, but it would be nice for us to be able to look through all of them so that we can actually hear them, and maybe actually have them come here and talk to us about why they would be good for the Historic Commission or why they'd be good for the Parks Commission, because this just isn't enough information, especially for these boards who have a hard time keeping members in it. If we could actually get people in here to talk about why they're invested in our community instead of just rushing through on these things. It'd be nice to be able to absorb this a little bit quicker than people resigning last night, and now we have to appoint people this morning, or this.
I have the same concerns. You know, Councilor Schwartzer brought up the fact that Parks and Rec hasn't been able to make a quorum. We had the same issue with another committee last year. I think HPC is another committee that's had problems getting a quorum. This is the only opportunity, or the most important opportunity, I think, for residents to have impact into the system and to help shape city policies. And if we're not going out and engaging people and getting people to participate, go to meetings, make decisions, inform council, I don't think we're doing a service. I don't have any problem with the 3 that we have in front of us, Mayor. I have raised issues with the process previously. I'm not particularly satisfied with it. I'd like to see council more engaged in the process, and I'm not quite sure how to go about doing that.
Well, can we move these forward so that things can happen?
Absolutely.
Is that a motion?
I would really like to see all the people who applied, though, not just the 3 that were brought forward.
I say that, Councilor Rowe, because I know all 3 people, otherwise.
Right, and there are not others sitting out there that are, there's nobody that.
There are no others for these positions.
There are,
Nathan Christensen didn't apply?
no,
I haven't seen one.
no,
Do we still have openings?
If-
Yes.
I have to look. Maybe he could have, I can't, I'll have to look at my file, but.
Counselor Schwartzler.
Do we, even if we fill these positions, are there still open positions on the board?
There's a open position on the HPC, and there's, I know there's a library one, and I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I think there's a couple items. Is it possible, can we have Emmanuel do a call out in the next newsletter for interest in commissions, boards, and committees, and maybe put some language in there about what the commitment is for those? I think all of them are primarily one meeting a month, so it's not a huge lift, and I think, are all the meetings still done virtually?
Yeah, they're
No reason,
on
yeah.
Fridays.
I'm gonna try to speak really loudly. Yes, every meeting has a Zoom component as required by the state law.
And maybe we could look in the future of changing the Independence Charter so that it goes through council instead of just one member, all applications that come through.
What's involved with doing that? That's my question. I've had that question a couple of times. What's involved with modifying the charter?
It's a vote of the people.
Okay,
It's a vote.
does it have to be on the ballot?
Yes.
Okay.
So what I'm trying to make sure we move it. So you're moving to approve those that are there. Okay, I've got a motion to approve. Do I get a second?
Second.
I have a second. Further discussion?
Yes, is there an opportunity for training for these appointees as there is for council members?
There is going to be training because of, as I think we discussed, well, I think it was mentioned a while back, there is going to be having to be training for all commissions and councils and boards to meet state requirements. That's coming up. Okay, all in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed.
Opposed.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much. Let's move on. I have a proclamation that I get to read. Before I do that, I had the opportunity to visit with Councilor Coor and Councilor Martin Willis, and they had both indicated a willingness to switch their liaison commitments. So Councilor Martin Willis will go to the continuum of care, and then Councilor Coor will go to the Planning Commission and HBC as the liaison. Okay? Moving forward, let me read the proclamation. Get to read this. Whereas on February 28th, 1914, a progressive group of ladies of Independence formed the Civic Improvement League to work on projects to improve the city, and whereas on May 8th, 1929, the Women's Club of Independence donated a lot on the southeast corner of Monmouth and 3rd Street to the Public Library Board for the purpose of erecting, building, equipping a good and suitable public library building thereof. And whereas the Women's Club of Independence has for more than a century hosted, organized, and encouraged projects for a positive community environment, now therefore I, John McCardle, the Mayor of Independence, do hereby proclaim February 28th, 2024, Women's Club Day, Women's Club of Independence Day, and wish them a happy 110th birthday. So I'm so issuing that proclamation. And with that, Councilor Morton, would you like to give a library board and a museum board report, please?
Yes, actually, I'm switching the order. We're doing museum first.
Fine.
And I'm reporting on these because I'm the council liaison to these boards. Attendance at the Heritage Museum continues to be impressively high. School groups are already booked for the coming months. Volunteers have been dedicating many hours to museum work, from hosting students to digitizing records. The museum board has been working on bringing a 3/4 scale replica of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial to our community. The Wall That Heals is what it's called, and it's very large and comes with specific hosting requirements. There appears to be a strong interest in having that traveling exhibit come here. Current and coming exhibits have been well advertised. By taking advantage of no or low-cost portable exhibits, Director Natasha Adams keeps the offerings at the museum fresh and timely. The newest exhibit opened on March 5th, and will open on March 5th, and it's called Pictures of Nursing, and is a display of a century of images of nursing and nurses. The 501c3 nonprofit organization that supports Heritage Museum is a robust group. A fundraiser is planned for May 4th at the Elks Club, a special movie event. Plans to establish a movie series started last November with the very well attended of the showing of a silent movie, Nosferatu. All proceeds are devoted to completely to the benefit of the museum and its mission. And now this is the report from the library. The Independence Library's Youth Coding League was recently featured front page in the Statesman Journal. Director Patrick Bodley has an innovative vision for the library, and hosting and sponsoring the Youth Coding League is just one aspect of that vision. Our library continues to be one of the high-traffic areas in the community. Library use has not diminished despite the elimination of Saturday service dictated by budget cuts. Our community values its library, and it shows in the constant use of the facility. Library program is well attended, participation numbers continue to rise, book bingo for adults and kids, mystery book club, story times, and crafting afternoons are very popular. The library staff make sure these events are engaging for all ages. The Friends of the Library, the nonprofit group supporting the library, is always looking for members, so please consider joining this group. Summer reading is coming soon. Each year, activities are organized around a new theme that is consistent with all libraries in the system. Summer reading is for everybody, not just for kids. Think ahead and plan to do some reading this summer because there are prizes.
Thank you, Counselor, appreciate it. Counselor Court.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to read a little bit from the last update from our executive director that we hired a few months ago. I want to remind people that Mid-Atlantic Valley Homeless Alliance meetings are public meetings and anyone can attend. I'm not going to go through a long laundry list of things we've been working on, but the website is very up to date, so if you're at all curious, please check it out. Between the last meeting and today, we submitted an application for the Youth Homelessness System Improvement Grant. That essentially is to build a sustainable system improvement that would result in measurable progress and to prevent youth homelessness throughout Marion and Polk counties. And the system improvement activities will develop the capacity of young people with lived experience, service providers, and system partners to better understand local conditions, align efforts, and implement best practices and measure progress. We also met with a group of local experts who have been providing rental assistance during the pandemic primarily to begin discussions around a long-term rental assistance program through state funding. We had a first good meeting and I'm looking forward to learning more from this group. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, appreciate it. Okay, let's move forward. We're passing the city manager report and the staff presentation. We're now going to the public hearing on annexation, and I have a script that I get to read. I'll now open a public hearing on annexation of property and designation of zoning, file number AX2024-01. My name is John McCardle. I'm the mayor and the chair of this hearing. The hearing will be conducted in accordance with Independence Development Code and State Law, ORS 197.763. Specifically, the staff will first present the staff report and recommendations. The applicant will then have an opportunity to present the proposal and address any issues raised by the staff report and recommendation. For the public testimony, first I'll ask to hear from people who would like to speak in favor of the proposal. I will then ask to hear from people who have neutral comments or questions about the proposal, neither for or against. Finally, those in opposition to the proposal will have an opportunity to present testimony, starting with the appellants. City staff may then present additional material and recommendations based on the public testimony. The applicant will be given the opportunity to have the last word. After each presentation, I'll ask for questions from council. If you intend to present oral testimony, please fill out a request to speak form located at the city reporter's desk. We're recording this hearing, so please also clearly state your name and address when you're called to speak. This will help in preparing accurate written minutes of the hearing and also assist with mailing copies of the decision to all interested parties. If you have written testimony or other evidence to submit, please give that to staff so it can be entered into the record. We ask that each speaker limit themselves to no more than 5 minutes. Please remember that all presentations are timed and you'll be informed when the allotted time has expired. All speakers exceeding the time limit will be asked to immediately conclude their remarks. do not finish your presentation, be sure to provide a copy of your statement to the city recorder. The applicant will not be limited to 3 minutes, but is encouraged to limit their presentation and is able to be respectful of our time. In order to minimize repetitive testimony, organizations are encouraged to have only one person speak for the group, with other members of the organization standing as though their support. Each person may testify only once unless called back to the podium at the request of the council to respond to a question. Thank you for your consideration. Mayor and the council is not required to disclose any conflicts of interest, ex parte contacts that we have with the proposal or the applicant. That is, whether we have any financial or other personal interest in the proposal and whether we have spoken with anybody about the proposal outside of this hearing. Also, councilors may only participate if they can do so without undue bias, either for or against the application. Do any councilors wish to make any disclosures? I don't see anybody waving their hand. Okay. Are there any challenges for the audience as to conflicts of interest, ex parte contacts, or biases related to any member of the council? See anybody? State law requires me to tell you a number of things at the beginning of the hearing. First, the applicable substantive criteria that apply to this application are contained in the written staff report and will be identified and discussed in the oral staff report. Second, your testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward these criteria or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or development code that you believe apply to this application, and that's ORS 1977635B. Third, failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker or other people an opportunity to respond may preclude appeal of the decision on this application based on that issue. That's ORS 1977635C. Finally, to the applicant, failure to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the city to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in certain circuit court. ORS 197763963B. Staff now present the staff report.
Thank you very much. And hi there, everybody. My name is Fred Evander. I'm the city planner here at the City of Independence. And I'm happy to present on an annexation tonight. It is for a property at 6525 Corvallis Road. It's tax map 8433, tax lot 100. It's a 7.96 acre parcel going south down Corvallis Road. How annexations typically work, and I think that it's always a good idea to sort of house various land use actions and the reason for why we're doing something. An annexation can only apply to a property that's within an urban growth boundary of the city. It's not in the city, but it's been classified as a place where the city expects to grow over 20 years or whatever sort of time frame. Once the property is in the city limits, it can then receive water, sewer services. It can also have city zoning applied to it. It can also apply for a city permit via things like a building permit application or things like a subdivision application. Right now, this proposal would not deal with any of those things. It solely is asking to come into the city limits. As such, there's no zoning that's been designated for this property at this point. This application is specifically for an annexation and a zone change, because once it comes into the city, a zone then needs to be applied to the property. And so when you look at our code, subchapter 11, it specifically calls out type 3 applications, annexation and zone change. It's one application, so we handle them in the same way. So we handle them at the same time. They're one application per our code. So as such, this application is subject to the Independence Development Code, subchapters 11, 12, which is zone changes and plan amendments. Subchapter 11 is our administrative code. And You'll note that I included subchapter 14 as one of the criteria for this application. Amazingly though, subchapter 14, which is our annexation chapter, does not apply to this application. So I noted it in the staff report, but it is the annexation subchapter as it is written right now only applies to the southwest portion of the community, and this is outside of the southwest portion of the community. Based on all of that, you'll note in my staff report various things. This is consistent with the statewide planning goals. One of the statewide planning goals is Goal 10, which seeks to promote housing development in a community. Bringing a property into a community enables housing development to occur. If a land remains in an urban growth boundary and doesn't have city services or city zoning attached to it, it cannot develop at urban densities. Bringing it into the city would then apply those things that could make it be developed at urban intensities as envisioned for quite a while. I will note that this property has been in the urban growth boundary since 1979. When you look at this map in this document, it shows it. So you can see we're talking about this property right there, which is in the urban growth boundary. The property's been in the growth boundary for longer than my life, which is kind of crazy to think about. As such, things like the countywide planning policies or the urban management agreement are intended to promote the urbanization of that land. It's also consistent with our comprehensive plan. Some of the policies related, or the goals related to land use in our comprehensive plan seek to utilize land use regulations that are appropriate for the property. This is envisioned in an area for future residential use, as can be seen on our future land use map. Any sort of subdivision or future site design review or development that would occur on it would need to be consistent with our development code. Based on all of those things, it will be consistent with those goals and policies of the comprehensive plan. It also will be consistent with our public facilities element. Currently, we have water, sewer, transportation plans that have been drafted for the area that envision how to serve this area with future development. As a subdivision or a site design review or a building permit occurs on it, the application will need to be consistent with those plans. That's not something that the city per se will have to pay for. It's something that the developer will extend to the site, if that makes sense. Also, things like system development charges will help to contribute to the facilities that are necessary for the rest of the facilities in the city. It's also consistent with administrative provisions of the code and the zone changes and plan amendments. You'll note that there's 3 criteria for zone changes and plan amendments. One of them is there's an error in the zoning. That, I would argue, takes place anytime a property is annexed. Once a property is annexed, you cannot no longer have county zoning. We don't administer county zoning. If the property is annexed, the zone change has to happen. Because we don't have I think it's suburban residential right now. We don't have a suburban residential zone. It would need to be changed. Based on that, it would meet the standard for zone changes. The zone that we are proposing to change this to is our mixed density residential zone. That was something when we prepared the housing needs analysis, we essentially evaluated housing types, housing capacity throughout the rest of the city, and we sort of looked at how various zones might accommodate future development. The mixed density residential zone is our most flexible zone. So it allows a variety of housing types, single family homes, duplexes, townhomes, small multifamily, as well as larger multifamily when it's part of the subdivision proposal. The code is written like that specifically because we knew that when future development came in and a subdivision was proposed, we could look at the site, we could see, okay, yes, that site is appropriate for multifamily there, or we could see it as part of a larger whole, rather than trying to do it on a one-off basis on lot by lot by lot. Based on all of those things, the recommendation of staff is that this be approved. We did go ahead and do all of the public notice provisions that we need to do for something like this. We sent it out to properties within 250 feet of the site. We posted the site. We ran it on the Department of Land Conservation and Development PAPA website. All of those things. We did receive one comment, and that's in your packet. Definitely take some time to read that comment as before you make a decision on the proposal. I guess that's basically all I've got. Does anybody have any questions of me?
Questions from council, and this is questions, not discussion, but questions? Please, Councilor.
So you're telling us that we can only judge this zoning based on subchapter 11 and 12 and maybe 14 in the future, but we can't even use that criteria because we can't change the zone on something that hasn't been incorporated into the city. So is that what you're saying? We have to annex it into the city before we can use this criteria, but then you're telling us that we have to use this criteria to determine if we want to change the zoning.
No, so the criteria that I referenced are specifically the criteria that we use for this proposal. So subchapter 11, 12, and 14.
But they don't apply until we annex it, is that correct?
No, so it's a really good question. Just because it's kind of, land use is kind of confusing. For this application, it's an annexation, and so there's certain criteria for the annexation. It's a specific type of application, and so this is a type 3 application. It's bringing the property into the city and establishing a zone for it. For that action, these are the criteria for it. If it was a different action, like the subdivision, it would be a type 2 application. It would be subject to different criteria. That's when we would bring in subchapter 90, which is our subdivision regulations. We'd bring in subchapter 23, which are specifically the standards of the zone, all that sort of stuff. So we would evaluate that application based on those criteria at that time.
I guess I still don't understand how we can apply subchapter 12 and subchapter 11 to change something that hasn't been incorporated into the city. I feel like we're mixing two things, and I think that's confusing.
Okay, yeah, so one way you could either think about them as two separate activities, or you could think about them as one consolidated activity. To get the annexation, they have to go through a type 3 process. In our code, the annexation process is in subchapter 11. That's where it's specifically specified in how I'm supposed to review. It's in subchapter 11.
Additional questions at this point?
Yes, I just wanted to make sure I understand. We're not changing a zone, we're annexing property and then assigning a zone?
That's correct, yeah.
Because we can't reuse the county zone because we don't have that.
Right, that's exactly right.
And-
We do not currently have this property zoned.
And from reading the staff report, it looks to me like the applicant has asked for that to be the zone assigned to it also.
The applicant asked for a residential zone. We looked at our housing needs analysis and we knew the analysis that went into just how housing might get spread throughout the city. And that's why we said, we think that the mixed residential zone is probably the best zone for you to try and come in under.
And I don't have all the terminology to make this a really cogent question, but aren't there also state laws that have changed density?
Yeah, so, yes, that's a very good question. So there's, how our zones work is we have, we'll say 4 primary residential zones. One of them is low-density residential, one of them is medium-density residential, one is high-density residential, and one is mixed-density residential. Our mixed-density residential, in a lot of ways, looks a lot like our, let's say our medium-density residential zone. It just allows slightly more uses. What I will say is each of the zones are based on, they originally had densities associated with them. But what the state did is they said, you can't, when they expanded the allowance of duplexes on single-family lots, we had our single-family residential zone, our low density was 8 units per acre. Well, that was based on like 5,000 square foot lots, 8 of them, essentially you get to an acre, and so they said 8 units per acre. Well, the immediate question was, if you can do a 5,000 square foot lot and you can do a duplex on it, what happens to that 8 units per acre? And so all of a sudden, that density went up from an assumed 8 to potentially 16 units per acre. And so, I don't know if that helps at all.
But none of those apply
None of those apply.
if we do not bring those into the city. But if we do bring this into the city, then we are forced to do that high-density residential area. That's what will happen to that area.
Yes, the urban growth boundary assumes urbanization of an area, and the city has assumed that urbanization would occur in that area since at least 1979.
Additional questions at this point? Sure, we'll have some more a little bit later. Okay, so following down on my script, and I don't see, I have the list of people who want to speak on annexation. I don't, Karen, is this where I reference the written communication?
Yeah, that I distributed.
Okay, council received this electronically from Christopher Harlamillo, and he's opposed to this. And wants some consideration. And council saw this in advance, but we handed it out here, so I just wanted to make sure it was referenced. Okay, I don't see anybody that wants to speak in favor of this. And I don't have any cards that say neutral. Checking here. And we have some folks who would like to speak in opposition. And so I'm going to just go down the list here. And remember, you have 5 minutes. And Sarah Ramirez, you get to be the first person.
Thank you, Council, for having me. My name is Sarah Ramirez. I am at 1585 River Oak Road, and I am directly across from the parcel in question. My concerns are that annexation is a necessary thing for urban growth. We know this. Where that piece of property is, though, causes a lot of concern on how, seeing that it would probably be developed shortly. I mean, I think that's the intention of the individual applying for the annexation. We have a huge issue of how to get anything over there. There is a piece of property between that annexation that is wetlands. Our road is right at the end of that property, and we have constant issues with water being run across there, with electricity and gas lines. So there's a concern of what is the proposal to annex that, what would that do to that area? If you have driven out Highway 51, you understand that that is a very rural area where that annex is right at the middle of a S-curve. So there is the concern of what is that going to do to traffic? We've seen a huge increase in traffic in that area as well. We're right at kind of the end of the bridge, and we all know how much fun that is getting off at the end of that bridge. Between 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock in the evening, we have seen multiple accidents in that area. So there's a real concern both what that will do not only to the property in that area, but to traffic, to all of the utilities that are being run through there. So that's a concern. So I currently stand opposed. I don't think there's enough information. I've read through everything. I still don't understand, and I still didn't understand the whole proposal as far as when it's annexed to zone it, how we come to a mixed density in that area, because I don't think our current utility system will support that. So I'm not gonna take the whole 5 minutes. I don't think I need to speak more than that. I just don't think there's enough information right now to properly say, yes, let's annex it, and then have to define it immediately with the zone. That feels very uncomfortable. It doesn't feel like there's enough information. I would love to see an environmental impact on that area as well, because it is wetland. And so it's a big concern. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. David Klein. Evening.
Evening, Mayor, members of council. Just get my 5-minute thing going here for you. Respectful? Okay, I don't think it'll take 5 minutes, but thank you. I'm here in opposition to the proposed McMullen property annexation. This property has not yet demonstrated any minimal ability to serve this project with utilities and multimodal connectivity. In truth, this property bears as much relationship to the city of Independence as Buena Vista, but for being a few miles closer. There is no connection to the current city nor any prospective one, given the information currently available. The mere fact that the legally mandated connectivity is occurring through a cherry stem using railroad right-of-way says it all about the project's physical relationship to the city. Will the property owner provide sidewalks or paths all the way to the next closest walk on Corvallis Road for school-aged children and pedestrians and bicycles? Will there be a railroad crossing into adjacent city land to the west? Will there be a north-south roadway connection to the northern neighborhood other than the highway? How are utility requirements going to be met if the only option is to extend utilities down Corvallis Road? Can a 7-acre development truly sustain that kind of investment? Frankly, given the proposed major hike in STCs, who's going to build there anyway? It should also be a concern that serving this project will be a net drain on the general fund. It is well understood that residential development, especially disconnected as this is, costs more in general fund services, i.e. police, than they produce in new tax revenue. All things considered, the only potential beneficiary of this property is the property owner through the increased value he receives from the enhanced entitlement of the property. Likely as not, the property will be flipped to make a profit, with only a series of problems to be solved by the community later. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I return 3 minutes to you.
Thank you, appreciate that. Kathleen Jepson? Good evening and welcome to council.
Good evening. I'm Kathleen Jepson. I reside at 1586 River Oak Road. I am just a field away from the property in question. I have a few questions. It seems like this has brought up more questions than it has brought up answers. And listening to this presentation has brought up even more questions. Most of my concerns have already been echoed by my neighbors, but I will go forth with it. And that is our first responders and who's going to be providing and funding for additional first responders, law enforcement, fire, EMS. Having had to utilize some of those services in the last year, timely service is lacking in our area because we just don't have enough people to do the jobs. The neighboring field that separates the property Right now, that's on a farm deferral. What will happen to that property when it gets when this area, should this area become rezoned? What's gonna happen to my neighbor's field, my neighbor's farm deferral to their farm? Are they potentially going to become rezoned and potentially have to be forced out of their homes? The neighbor in question happens to be the Hills, the people who founded this community. The railroad lease that's coming from Henry Hill. If it's not designated use, if it's not going to its designated use, isn't that to be going back to the original owners, which would be the Hill family, for, from their, donation to the railroad company? And finally, and I will wrap it up, there's quite a lot of wildlife that goes into that area. Environmental impact, I definitely would be very, very interested in seeing. Myself and my neighbors, we enjoy watching the turkeys that are having the families out there breeding, the deer. I've had a few elk. I've had the 2 largest set of black-tailed deer I've ever seen in my life duke it out in my neighbor's field. We have a lot of wildlife in this area, and with that farm separating this and potentially rezoned property, I worry about what happens to that farm. It would be a very disconnected community and not necessarily part of what we would consider the Independence Corridor. So I'd like to see more information come forth. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate that. And Brian Poos indicated he wanted to be noted that he was opposed, and he wanted it just to be noted. So noted, and it's in the record. So the next person to speak, I don't have anybody else that's listed to speak in opposition. So and the applicant isn't here. Is that correct, Fred? Yeah. Oh, you are here? Yep. You get the opportunity now.
I don't really have a presentation. I'm here to answer questions. I've reviewed the staff report and don't have any objections to it. I'll tell you why I'm doing it. I have a strong passion for affordable housing. I hope to do that someday. That's not the plan right away. I'd like to annex it in, hope to divide off the house that exists, and someday develop some affordable housing for starter homes, elderly people. That's my passion. That's the main reason I started this. But I'm here to answer questions if there are.
Do folks have questions for the applicant at this point?
What do you think?
Go ahead, Councilor Dwork.
What's your definition of affordable housing?
My definition, something much cheaper than what's available out there now.
Configuration wise?
You mean size-wise? 1,000 to 1,500 square foot homes.
Single family homes?
Single family homes.
What if I need single family homes or not?
Let's be the questions. Additional questions? Sorry, this is only councilors doing that.
Has there been any environmental studies?
No, we don't, no.
That's a question I'd like to ask Fred if I can.
Oh, okay, we're gonna have we'll have an opportunity at the next.
Take it back up? Okay.
Yeah, staff will have an opportunity here. Additional questions for the applicant at this point?
Do you feel it's gonna impact the farms next to it?
An annexation, no. A development someday, I don't, the only farming I see.
I'm talking about the development. I'm not talking about the annexation. I think we're getting caught up in terms here.
Well, I think we're here for an annexation, right? We're not here for development. Are we here for an annexation?
This is correct. Just a question, and let the gentleman answer, please. Go ahead, sir.
I believe we're here for an annexation.
You're correct. Additional questions?
Yeah, quickly.
Please, thank you.
Sorry. So I'm hearing a lot about potentially wetlands on the property.
Mm-hmm.
Are you aware of wetlands on or adjacent to the property?
I'm not aware of it, but I have honestly not had it tested.
Questions? Thank you, sir, appreciate that.
Thank you.
So now I'm going to have city staff summary response to public testimony. And might be several speaking here. Mr. Vander, I think it's to you.
Hey, I don't trust those mics, so I'm coming up here again. So let me wrote down stuff. So I guess there's a number of things to respond to. One of the things that when I went back, Sean sort of mentioned to me, it's helpful to remember the context for why urban growth boundaries got created. They were created to protect farmlands, to protect rural lands, right? The idea was you make it easy to develop inside a growth boundary so you can protect what's outside of a growth boundary. That's essentially why the Oregon planning system got created 50 years ago. So yes, within the urban growth boundary, there are going to be farms that get developed. That's how it's intended to work. Things like Brandy Meadows was a farm that got developed. In terms of things like environmental impacts, things like wetlands, one of the criteria for annexations is not specifically wetland analysis. The reason for that is because you'll remember that I mentioned to get water service to a property outside of the growth boundary, you have to go through an annexation process. We don't just give people the right to connect to water and sewer outside of the growth boundary. You have to annex in. Some people just want to annex in to get those connections, right? We wouldn't make that property coming in annex or provide a wetland analysis to get that connection. That's part of the reason why the annexation process is a little bit different than what a future development would have to go through. Any sort of future development will have to analyze wetlands. That, if it's not directly part of I saw Gordon in here, when Gordon went through Southwest Crossing, he provided the wetland analysis as part of that subdivision proposal. When, Larry's not in here, but when Larry Golke went through the Brandy Meadows process, one of the conditions we wrote on it was you have to do a wetlands analysis prior to the creation of the lots to make sure that you weren't creating lots in the wetland areas. That's part of the subdivision process, that if the applicant does go forward with a land use proposal, they will have to do those things. Also, things like connectivity to services. Any sort of subdivision proposal will have to provide services to satisfy what they're proposing in that subdivision. If there's a whole bunch of houses getting proposed, that might include a looped water line. The applicant will need to figure out how to do that, right? There's a fire requirement associated with one-way streets. You can only have a certain number of homes off a single access driveway. The applicant will have to meet that. In terms of the cherry stem, the annexation drawing, can you scroll down to that map just so folks can see it? The annexation needn't have a cherry needn't have a cherry stem coming down. The reason that that it's drawn like that is specifically because when River Oak was created, this portion was never annexed. So as part of this, they could just come straight across from the Monmouth well site, or the Monmouth, is that a tank there, Gerald? They could come straight across from that, across the railroad. There wouldn't need to be a cherry stem there. That would be an annexation just straight across a right-of-way. The reason that this got drawn like this was to try and clean up what happened with River Oak in the past. Yeah.
Does that bring into question what Mr. Klein was talking about with transportation and people walking down the roads? If we don't have that cherry stem there, then how would we connect that property to the city limits?
It's quite possible as part of the subdivision. Again, all subdivision reviews are based on the application that's submitted. And I say that like that because we can't apply conditions that are in excess of the impacts that subdivision has created. If it's a 4-lot subdivision, it might just include frontage improvements along Corvallis Road, and it might end there. If it's a larger subdivision, it's quite likely that we would require a connection from here up to the existing sidewalk, so folks could get effectively into the downtown area. It all depends on the subdivision, and I agree that there's some vagueness there. There's some uncertainty, but any future application has to go through that subdivision review process. That is a public hearing process. It will be noticed in the exact same way that this was noticed. It will go to people within 250 feet of the project site. A notice board will be put on the property. It will get put on our website, all that sort of stuff. It will be a public hearing before the planning commission, not you folks. So it's a similar process. Folks will have the same opportunity to talk as part of that application.
Questions for,
Yes.
please, go ahead, Councilor Court.
We're getting way ahead of ourselves here. You know, this is a simple annexation. I understand that we could be talking about development, but like you just said, the planning commission has that responsibility initially, not us. I do have some questions, though. The comments you made, Fred, about wetlands, and what the developers provide during that process, that's not exactly an environmental impact statement, I'm sure, you know, and I do have some concerns about that. I would like to make sure that, you know, if we are annexing wetlands, that we're doing this responsibly. I care about turkeys too, care about deer too, but quite honestly, we're between a rock and a hard place. The governor is forcing us to make decisions about density housing, and we're gonna have to put some higher density housing in the city. There's just no way around it. But,
And your question is?
yeah, well, the question was, you know, about the environmental impact statement. Are we going to do something like that when we annex this piece of property? If we're bringing a wetlands into the city, is there any process by which we can look at it now and make sure that we're not doing anything damaging?
We don't do that. We haven't done that with properties that we've brought into the city in the past. So, I mean, a good example is the industrial area off of Hoffman Road. That had some wetlands on it, got brought into the city. I don't know.
Oftentimes those conversations are wetlands mitigation conversations, not wetlands preservation conversations, and that's my concern.
Right.
So I just want to make that point, but can I ask, Chief, can I ask you a question? One of the speakers talked about lack of first responder services in that area currently. I'm just curious, who's responsible for the area now, Polk County?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So Fred, let me see if I'm trying to sort through this. So what you're essentially saying here is that the request for annexation, bring the dirt in, then it becomes part of the city. And you're suggesting that we put a zone on it because you have to put some zone on it. And then once the people that own the dirt decide what they want to do with it, then it has to go through the whole process of, for whatever it is, and depending upon what they put on it, whether it's one or many or whatever it is, then that would go through the whole process of roads, infrastructure, and all that other stuff. So what your suggestion is whether the dirt comes in and whether we use we have to apply some zone. And so you're suggesting that this be the zone to begin with, and then depending upon what the applicant wants to do, the owner wants to do later on, just determines what the other parts are. Is that a fair, folksy explanation of what we're talking about here?
Yep, should the dirt be brought in?
Okay,
I
so
did,
two questions for,
rest of that, there you go, go ahead.
Mr. Evander. So within, the existing city limits, do we have sufficient land to meet our near future growth needs?
So our housing needs analysis identified our housing needs and it anticipated for 20 years. And basically it got to that growth boundary and it said, you've got enough land in that growth boundary, but it was like, you're gonna fill out the growth boundary.
Okay, so I understand that. My question is,
May I was unclear on the answer there, so that was, yes, we have enough dirt, or we don't have enough dirt.
Within the next 20 years, the growth boundary will be full. The dirt will be
okay,
used
so
up
my
according to that
question
analysis.
was actually specifically regarding existing city limits.
Right.
So not UGB. So what I'm saying is within our existing city limits, so without annexing anything else in, I mean, what kind of land inventory do we have growth-wise? 5 years, 10 years?
So it's a tough question, and I appreciate it. Part of the, what I'll say is, it's so hard with the fluctuations in the market to say exactly how much land there is. If people are going really fast, we have 2 large lots that are owned by 2 properties that could go essentially fairly quick. I would argue that it makes sense to get a diversity of lands into the city so people have different opportunities to go forward with developing.
Okay, and my second, yes, that really was one question. Okay, so the second is, I'm hearing some concerns about a sort of a disconnect from, you know, the rest of what we know and love as our downtown Independence. Are there, I guess, are there other areas that maybe are within more proximity to our already developed sort of downtown area that could be annexed first and then sort of growing outward rather than sort of taking this jump to another area?
So that's a good question too. What I would say is we have plans to connect this better into the rest of the city services. Part of that includes some facility investments that we plan on making in the area. We also have a desire, a long-time desire to build out Mountain Fir Road, which would connect just south of this property. That would connect this better into the rest of the city.
If I may, Mayor, I apologize because I'm not touched that thing. We have been talking, as everyone knows, about a water treatment facility. That water treatment facility with public workshops will be a part of just beyond that land. And so what Fred is trying to say is that will be connecting. We have a plan to put in a water line. We call it the Rallis Road line, and it will go in there to connect our water treatment plant to the main system. And we're annexing Corvallis Road into the city, because parts of it are now in the county. And so this is not just popping up, we have some other things going on for the city in that area.
Good, thank you, good.
Additional question, Councilor Schwartzler.
Fred, would it be correct to say that the property owner, as it stands today, could choose to go the route of developing through Polk County?
Yes, there is, yes, they could. There is a urban growth management agreement, something like that, that the city and the county entered into in the 90s or something like that. It might have been earlier. So anytime that there's development in the growth boundary, they're supposed to consult with us. It really does limit what can be done with the property. What I would argue is, I saw it a lot when I was up on Whidbey Island in Washington. When somebody develops a 5-acre property with a house, it very rarely then turns into an urbanized development.
Well, and I guess that's the second part of my question / comment is if they did go through the county route, we don't have as much control or say over how that development could happen.
Right.
For better or for worse.
That's exactly
So
right.
a benefit could be of bringing it into the urban growth boundary, or annexing it in, annexing it in is that we would have ultimately no control over what that development looks like.
That's absolutely right.
But then we wouldn't have any control over that development because we have to fall under the state guidelines of how we zone it.
No, we zone our property, we zone our dirt, our way. There are certain requirements that they say that we we need to do, like every single family lot has to allow a duplex if somebody wanted to do a duplex, but we still have, with our subchapter 23, which would apply to this property, we wrote that.
And any development that is coming in obviously has to go through the application process through planning commission, still needs to look at all the master plans, utility plans to make sure that it can even be serviced. And then it is up to the developer to make sets if it pencils out for them not to move forward. It's not a guarantee of development, it's an opportunity for them to pursue.
That's exactly right. The way I like to think about land use is it gets progressively more complicated. So this, I mean, honestly, this is sort of easy. The annexation is sort of the easy part. The subdivision gets a little more complicated. Once you start doing the facilities plans, you're into it, big money. And you're trying to figure out how to make this thing work. And then put in the infrastructure, that's even bigger money, right? And then you start putting up the houses.
Councilor Morton.
Couple of questions. You said big money. For who needs to spend that big money?
Oh, well, it would be that, it's definitely the applicant if somebody is proposing.
Okay, and another question, is there any reason why we couldn't bring this property in as like medium density instead of mixed?
We absolutely could. The one thing that the housing analysis identified is we're gonna have a whole lot more difficulty meeting some of the potentially higher density housing types if we don't bring in a lot of land in this mixed zone. Part of the reason for that is what the housing needs analysis and the process of the analysis really found was either we're gonna need to rezone more land high density, or we're gonna use this zone to try and get a mix of housing types in a number of different places. Either we figure out how to do a lot of it in limited locations, or we try and spread it out and sort of integrated, comprehensively designed
In other words,
neighborhoods. Mixed, exactly.
Okay, and am I correct in assuming that, let's say we annex this and it is mixed residential, but when somebody wants to develop it, they will have to do a wetland study, they will have to do an environmental impact analysis, and would there also be an infrastructure analysis?
Yes, I mean, they're gonna need to show exactly how they're gonna serve this with water, with wastewater. We're gonna wanna see how they're gonna treat stormwater on the site. It's quite likely that a traffic impact analysis would be required too. It's possible that if it doesn't meet the trip threshold, we might just require a traffic impact letter, which is a less sort of review, but yeah, we look at all of that stuff when they go through the subdivision.
So in other words, throughout this whole process, there are safeguards in place.
You bet.
Additional questions for the speaker? Okay. So, I have my script I'm reading here. There being no further testimony for the council tonight, I now declare the hearing closed. pursuant to ORS 1977636E.
Mr. Mayor,
Come again?
the hearing and the record.
Hearing and the record closed. Thank you very much. Correct wording there, thank you. Pursuant to ORS 1977636E, the applicant has the right to submit final written arguments that will be included in the record. Its submission must be made within 7 days and may not contain new evidence. Submission may only contain written arguments. If the submission contains any new evidence, the new evidence will be rejected and the council will only consider the written arguments. The applicant also has the right to waive the submission of final written argument. If the applicant does not waive the submission of final written argument, the council will not be able to make a final determination on the application tonight. Does the applicant wish to waive the submission of final written argument?
Yes.
I hear the applicant wishes to waive the submission of the final written argument, is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you, appreciate it. The applicant waives his right to submit final written arguments so the council may discuss and deliberate on the matter. We now have discussion by the city council, and so here's what will happen here. Discussion by the city council, only questions asked of staff are allowed after the hearing is closed. The city council will determine whether to make a decision immediately or at a later date. The decision is made immediately, move in second to adopt findings, the decision, and the condition of approval, motions, votes, decisions announced, and will be confirmed in writing via the notice of decision. Did I do that right, Karen? Thank you. 4-page script. Okay, discussion by city council.
Mayor, if we push it off to another date, do we have to open it up for public comment again?
No, the hearing is closed.
I think we should reconsider moving it to another date, just so that we can, I think we need to have these two proposals separated, the request for annexation and the zone change, so that we can debate either issue and not both of them combined in once. I don't think they should have been combined on the same issue, because you're asking us to look at criteria that only applies to one when it's been approved by another. And I think that's very confusing for the city council to look at. So I think we should look at this again in the future and maybe actually consult. Did we hear anything from the Hill Farm on what their opinion is? Those are my two questions on it. I don't think we should have blended
If I may.
simultaneous and then just.
If I could, let me try to get clarification, and I'm gonna look to staff. Can you respond to that one, please?
We're double checking that it's one application, so we can't bifurcate it. You address the application.
It's one application, but it says we're requesting on page 26, it says requesting annexation and simultaneous zone change of the site. So that doesn't give us the opportunity to debate the zone changes. If we approve one, we have to approve both, and we have to approve them both as written.
Correct. It's one application.
And that's my concern, it should be two.
We can't bifurcate at this point in time.
Okay, so what you're saying is whether it's we have to play with the cards that are done. So we have to do this, both of this, we have to do the annexation and zone. Is that correct? And staff is checking here for a moment.
We are checking.
Yeah.
When annexation and zone change will request a concurrent with one another, the city council reviews such a request without review or recommendation by the planning commission. They are considered one, and they are considered together.
Okay, so that's the choice we have.
But I understand that, I just think if we were to separate the two, then the planning commission would have say on the zoning, correct? And we're kind of leaving, we're not forcing the issue by taking them out of the loop, by saying that we can do this without the consideration, because we've mixed the two.
I understand your concerns. It's not an option.
I think we can deny the application and then they can resubmit an application with different.
Is that an option? I'm looking again. I'm sorry, I'm asking staff a lot of questions, but.
It's perfectly fine. You do have the opportunity to deny the application. That's one of the options.
Okay, we are in discussion.
But why would we
Go ahead,
I guess a
Councilor
point of
Schwartz.
clarification on that.
And I want to clarify, you deny, you have to find the fact that comply with land use. And Fred can
Yeah,
clarify
we have to have
that.
an actual reason.
Correct.
So
And at
let,
this point, my understanding is the applicant has done exactly what we've asked them to do.
You are correct.
and so let me get some clarification here because you hit where I was scribbling to. So, if we approve, we have the rule, the supporting documentation that says why. If we deny, we have to be able to give a clear, specific reasons that fit within the development code and the rules that are written. Otherwise, we have a legal challenge.
You are correct, Mayor.
That's because that's because the way the city wrote this. If we hadn't written it this way, we wouldn't have to use the criteria that you put on our plate that we have to use. We've combined two issues that we shouldn't have combined, and now we're forced to follow the rules of Appendix 11, 14, and 15, is it right numbers?
I understand your point.
Because they combined the two. We shouldn't have never done that. We're setting precedents we should never have set.
Can I get some, can you hold for a moment? Not ignoring, not ignoring.
So I'm sorry. Yeah, so, I don't know, okay, they don't work. We'll go back up here. Or I can talk from over here without the microphone. So again, the reason that the annexation and the zone change are combined is because once you annex something, you have to establish a zone for it. The way that the code is written is it specifically gives you folks that authority. It doesn't say it goes through a planning commission process. It says that, and I mean, it's consistent with state law. In state law, you are the folks that can annex something. The planning commission could weigh in on that, but the code specifically, as it's written, says it comes straight to you. It's the only application like that. Because it comes straight to you, you folks also have the prerogative to set a zone for it as well. I will say that in the future, it might make sense to take something like subchapter 14, which currently only applies to Southwest Independence, and not make it just apply there. Like, it could potentially apply to other portions of the community. It doesn't seem like that would make that would be that hard of a change. But that's not one of the criteria to evaluate this application right now.
Thank you, Mr. Mander. I'm gonna go to Councilor Martin Willis first, and then Councilor Joe.
So, were this to be approved and assigned the MX zoning, if the property owner at a later date, once they decide what they would like to do with the property, felt that they needed a different zone to accomplish, their goals, they could then come back and request a zone change, yes?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Councilor Joe.
So what I'm hearing is everything was done right. There's no reason to deny it. And I was wondering if based on the impact of infrastructure or the neighboring properties, if that is deemed a viable reason to deny the application.
So if an application was proposed that would show the impact to the facilities, I would say, yeah, sure, that would be a viable one, or if they showed that they couldn't serve it with utilities. This application is specifically just to bring it in or not, and then to set a zone if it is brought in. There's no facilities impact that we could point to and say that proposal would somehow unnecessarily burden Corvallis Road or.
Okay. Councilor Moore.
Yes. The issue, I don't think, is whether or not a group of lawmakers and counselors and staff make rules 30 or 40 years ago, and we don't like them now. That may happen a lot, but isn't the issue that we have to deal with the laws that are currently in place and make a decision on this annexation request?
That's true. A lot of times, I will, as part of my spiel, say you are sitting as judges as part of this application. You are here to evaluate the application based on the criteria that are in place at the time and the merits of the application. My recommendation based on those things is that you folks approve this.
Is it possible at some point in time to change the rules and have these applications go to planning commission first?
Yeah, I would imagine that you could have something that says, like, specifically you want the planning commission to weigh in on a zone change, and then have the annexation come to you folks with a zone attached to it. We could figure out something like that. The way that this is written right now is it gives you folks specifically the prerogative to do that.
Okay. We've had a little bit of discussion, and I'm going to guess that people would like to make a decision today as opposed to waiting. I'm asking the question. Do people want to decide, or do you want to wait?
I want to decide.
Decide. Any if we're all okay for making a decision? Because it doesn't get any easier in the future. Okay. Someone could make a motion.
Is the sample motion in the packet still a good motion, Fred? I'm not sure if that file number is just a placeholder or not.
Is that the right number
Can I
here?
just read it as is under section, oh god, it's Roman numerals, I can't tell you.
It's this one right here.
I moved to approve file number. Is that it?
Yeah, this one right here that I've got on your screen.
Oh god, I'm looking at you instead of the screen, Karen. I moved to approve file number AX-2024-01, annexation of 7.96 acres at 6525 Corvallis Road, along with a portion of the Southern Pacific Railroad from the south border of the River Oak subdivision to the southern extent of 6525 Corvallis Road, adopting findings, conditions, and staff recommendations as provided in the staff report.
Second?
I have a motion and a second by Martin Willis. Now for discussion.
I'm still standing by my previous assertion that we shouldn't have put these two proposals in one application. So I'm going to vote no on this.
Okay. Additional discussion?
I would honestly prefer that this came in as single-family residential to be reassessed on zoning later, but I also understand that certain laws are already in place, and that's the structure under which we need to make decisions, and that's all I have to say about it.
Okay. All righty, we're going to move to the vote. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? I have Roden and Joe in opposition. Motion carries. Now, Mr. Vander, you have the next part, please. Do I have that correct? No, excuse me, I got that done. Okay. If no one objects, I'm declaring a recess until 5 minutes after 8. Without objection, we're in recess till 5 after 8. Thank you.
No.
With the railroad.
Yeah.
Everything else good?
Yeah, things are good. How are you doing?
Good.
You going to stay here for the SDC conversation?
That'll be the easiest way, because without going.
So why didn't you ever mention that the city of Mon and that's their access, and maybe it's gonna be the site for land somehow?
Karen, you ready? Staff, you ready?
Yes, sir, thank you.
Okay. We're back in session, and I knew we had something else to do. We have to do the ordinance for the, declaring tenant, territory annexed, and that's on page, it's 33. And so, I think we've discussed all the parts, and so there's an ordinance here. If someone would move that, please.
Yeah, I'm happy, there we go. I move to read the proposed ordinance, Council Bill 2024-01, in full as the text is contained in the council packet for the first time.
Second.
I have a motion second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Okay, and Roden is opposed? Motion carries. Since we didn't have a unanimous vote, the final ordinance votes will take place at the next council. Is that correct, Karen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So we now move on to item 7.3, water system development charges. It's a public hearing. And let me get my script out. I get scripts tonight. This evening, we'll have a public hearing, consider adoption of an update of the water system development charge methodology and fees. The city council will make a final decision based on the complete record, including written testimony submitted in advance and testimony received at tonight's public hearing. These proceedings will be recorded. For anyone wishing to speak, we're asking that you use the speaker card that are provided at the city recorder's desk. Called upon to speak, you must be recognized by the mayor and you must state your name and address for the public record. Before we begin, does any councilor wish to declare an actual or potential conflict of interest in this matter? I see no one. Okay, I'm opening the public hearing. I will now open the public hearing for the water system development charge methodology and fee. Staff report, good evening. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. I'll make this brief because I know there are folks that want to comment on this tonight. I also have Steve Donovan with me tonight from Donovan Enterprises. He's going to do a very brief PowerPoint presentation to go over the SDCs, very similar to what you saw in the work session, but it's been condensed. The city adopted an updated water master plan on March 28, 2023. The city also adopted an updated capital improvement plan on August 8th, 2023. City advertised a public notice of the scheduled public hearing regarding the update back on November 22nd, 2023. The notification of the hearing and the updated methodology was mailed certified to interested parties on November 22nd, and a copy of the draft methodology was made available for review at the city's website and at City Hall on December 27th. City Council held a work session on January 9th to review the updated methodology report. Staff took comments from Marion Cold Home Builders Association on January 9th. We conducted modifications to the SDC methodology, and based on those comments from the Home Builders Association on February 5th, and met with them to go over those changes. The copies of the updated report were provided to them at that meeting, and we also updated the report on the city's website on February 5th. We received no further comments during the time of the writing of this staff report, but you did receive 2 written comments. Everybody got a copy of those? Okay, good. So now I'd like to go ahead and introduce Steve Donovan so he can do the brief presentation, and then I'll finish up at the end.
Thank you, Gerald. Mayor, councilors, good evening. Steve Donovan, 9600 Southwest Oak, Suite 335, Portland, Oregon. Karen, can you run the PowerPoint for me, please?
Okay, it's gonna take a second here, because I have to do something.
What would a meeting be without a PowerPoint?
Okay, hold on a second.
Thank you. Okay, if we can go to the first slide, please. Back in January, I believe it was January 9th, we met as a group in a work session and spent quite a bit of time discussing this matter and went through quite a bit of heavy lifting details on it. Tonight's presentation is going to be quite a bit condensed for the purpose of my report is now finalized in your packets. We're going to talk about the history of the public involvement and disclosure concerning the SDC methodology change. Under statute, there's a very clear and precise roadmap for disclosure. Specifically, 90 days prior to the first reading of a resolution or ordinance tonight, the city has to notify people on its list, its interested parties list, of a pending methodology change. And we did that. And then 60 days prior to the first reading of resolution or ordinance, the draft methodology has to be made available. We've done that. So we can go to the next slide, Karen. What we did is we put together a chart, and on the horizontal x-axis is time, and on the y, the vertical axis, is the decision points or the outreach points. And as you can see, there were quite a few, including you people, which is rather, I would say unusual, but unique for this situation because this was such an important and critical piece of infrastructure and how it's being treated relative to the system development charges. You are all highly educated SDC elected officials, probably one of the most educated that I've worked with in a long time. Probably not because you wanted to, but we drag you along kicking and screaming. Next slide, Karen. Sorry for the egg shape there, but as you can see, we are proposing and asking you to consider raising your current system development charge for water from a single-family equivalent home from $3,307 to $22,567. This is a substantial increase. You are all aware of why that is and why we're proposing it. Next slide. Here now you see is just the water SDC relative to peer communities. And as you can see, this increase was, as I said, substantial, would be very high, and to my knowledge, the highest in the state if approved by this body. Next. Now this slide shows the peer communities for all SDCs, water, wastewater, transportation, parks, and storm drainage. And as you can see, with this proposed water increase, you would be near the top, but not the highest. And West Lynn in our peer group would be the highest. There are others in the state that are actually higher and will be growing. This is sort of the rate season. I know you're all aware, you're going through your budget cycle now. Part of your critical analysis is to adjust your fees and charges to meet your requirements. Other peer communities, all communities in the state are doing the same thing, and we'll be reviewing their SDCs.
Excuse me, Steve, can you define what you mean by peer community and how that's determined?
Sure, it's determined by us, staff, sitting down and looking at first local Polk, Marion area communities, and then we added into that other communities that are facing large infrastructure requirements. It's judgmental on our part. Any errors or omissions in this chart are my fault. Go ahead, Karen. So this is the short and the sweet and the end of it. I'd like to bring Gerald back up to bring it in for a landing, and I know you want to listen to the public tonight on this very important issue.
Thank you, Steve. So staff has made a recommendation based on the work session that we held with the council to adopt the attached resolution. There's also two other options available to the council. You can adopt the recommendation with amendments, or you can take no action. And right now, that's the end of the staff report. I'm more happy to answer any questions either now or at the end after comments.
Questions for Mr. Fisher? Councilor Joe?
I just had a question. On the chart where it showed the.
Go ahead and turn your mic on.
On the chart where it showed the total SDCs, and I think there was a brief comment that not everybody has raised them yet. on that chart, that some of those haven't actually raised their SDCs yet, and they're working on it.
That's correct.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
so that's kind of hard.
That's correct. That was a snapshot of December 2023 rates. We took a snapshot of what everybody else is charging. Are they moving? Sure they are.
There's some questions for staff at this point. Okay. We have testimony. We wish to hear from everyone who's interested in the proposal. Please state your name and address for the record. Testimony will be limited to, I'm confused, to 5 minutes. And if I recall correctly, were there some online?
Yes, Mayor, there are some attendees via Zoom.
Okay.
Karen is handling that. Karen, would you like the Zoom attendees to go first? I think that would make it easy if.
Okay. Yeah, let me pass out the written testimony that was received.
Just for everybody watching it, and I'm just confirming, this is already electronically shared with council in advance, home builders.
I assume that is correct, Mayor?
Yes.
The home builders.
Yes, I've seen that. Yeah, I've seen
And,
it.
yes, and line time, correct.
Thank you. So just so, we've seen this electronically, but we're being handed paper copies now, so just want to make sure that you know that.
Both of those, I believe, came in,
Yeah.
early today.
Right. Okay, Karen's gonna help us get with the folks online.
Can I highlight the water just a little bit? We also received comments as well from a member of the community. And I'll know that it went to Karen.
I'm sorry, what?
A member of the community did send an email to council discussing SDCs.
I didn't receive it.
I don't know if I got one.
Copy of it, it's a one from.
Yeah.
Who's it from?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, this one is from.
It's the same as this one, which we got before.
Oh, yeah, and then the other one from Mark Miller here in town.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all received that one too.
Yes, we did not.
I think I sent it to Karen.
Okay.
From Mark Miller?
I'm sorry, I don't recall, but.
Yeah.
I've seen that.
Yeah,
Yes.
we all saw.
Yeah, you're not on there.
Yes, we're all on that list. So let's go with the testimony, the folks online, and you'll tell me.
Mr. Hill, can you, you're now part of the meeting?
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Is everybody okay? Everybody's okay. Please go ahead, Mr. Hill. You have 5 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you. So yes, my name is David Hill. I'm with Allied Development. We've been developing in Oregon since 2002. Our headquarters are located currently at 16430 North Scottsdale Road, Suite 210, Scottsdale, Arizona 85254. So we started a project in Independence back in December of 2021. It's been a pretty long go of it. Comparatively to most of our projects, we're over 2 years into it now. Some months ago, we were able to finalize our tentative layout. It was a bit of a challenge meeting the zoning requirements at the time, but we were able to figure that out. There were a number of challenges we had to meet. One of the biggest ones was revolving around the failing intersection at Monmouth and 7th. And to that end, last spring, the city raised its traffic SDCs. The effect it had on my project, it resulted in an increase of about $1.8 million to the project. But we were determined to try and figure this out. Back in November, I flew into Oregon, went down to Independence, had a really long and productive meeting with city staff. From that meeting, Allied and city staff, we started to put together the beginnings of a creative and what I would really consider an out-of-the-box solution to solve for this very real hot button that the city and the residents are feeling with this intersection. So we put together the beginnings of a unique and a win-win situation. For us, it paved the way for Allied to be able to move forward with our project. And as for the city, being a win in that the agreement included, the developer writing a check to the city to the tune of about $2.3 million to fund that intersection improvement. So I think probably members of council, you can imagine my dismay when, soon after the new year, I learned that the city was contemplating an increase to the water SDCs, and it looks like that amount is that increase is just over about 19 grand. To put that into perspective for us, this would add about $4.35 million to the cost of our project, and that's before one home is built, right? I mean, well, we'd build some homes and pay along the way, but $4.35 million is about the round number, what that represents for us. Between the intersection improvement and the water SDC increase, this total financial blow to our project alone comes to about $6.7 million. And, this project was already challenging. It's 226 lots. So it's a high density. It's in a high density zoning. The lots are small per the zoning. And at the end of the day, we are located in a tertiary market. Things have changed since COVID. Tertiary markets were kind of a hot ticket back in the day. That the market, as everyone knows, has changed considerably in the last 18 months to 2 years. But at the time, I was able to make the numbers work for that intersection. But this project just simply can't sustain a $6.7 million hit. And I did want to make that crystal clear. For me, this water SDC increase proposal, it will kill this deal that we've been working on for over 2 years with city staff, and it will halt any further growth in Independence on my part. And I, no one holds a crystal ball, but I think I can pretty safely say that the chart you showed earlier kind of shows it all. Like to call Independence a peer of Westland or Oregon City or Wilsonville. I'm not sure where those, where that decision was made, but that's going to be this will halt development in Independence. Now, I will say that I understand the city needs to find a solution to this water issue, but I think you need to ask yourselves, what purpose is there in increasing water to SDCs to such a level that it's going to halt development, which will then result in no SDCs being collected for anything, whether it be water, sewer, traffic, park fees, anything like that. So it seems there's a logical question I think we need to ask ourselves. But again, I do understand that a solution needs to be found, and I'll end my time here with just making this request. I would like to ask City Council to decide to put a hold on this decision for a period of 90 days. And for me, this will allow two things. One, it will allow the city time to investigate more viable solutions, state funding, for example, which my attorney, Mike Connors, who's going to be speaking here in a bit, will touch on. But number two, it'll allow Allied and city staff the opportunity to take back up our working relationship and to try and address these issues in a way that results in a win-win situation. Otherwise, I just again want to make it very clear that we're out. We'll be forced out of this project after 2 years of working on it. Thank you very much, and available for any questions.
Okay. All right, let's go to the next speaker. I think that's Mr. Connors. Good evening, welcome to council.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Can you hear me as well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Mike Connors. I'm an attorney at Hathaway Larson, and I represent Allied Development. I was the one that prepared that letter that was submitted earlier today that outlines our concerns. And David did a good job of talking about the impact on Allied's project, which means that if you pass this, it will effectively kill that project and some of the opportunities that go along with that project, not only additional housing, but as David indicated, a very creative solution to the Monmouth 7th Street intersection problem that I think has been an issue for the city for some time. So what I'm going to focus on instead is more of the general flaws and problems that we see with the proposal. And as David indicated, we understand the city has an issue. They need to upgrade the water system and they need funds to support that upgrade. And we understand the allure of putting a lion's share of that cost on developers to pay for that. But there are major flaws with this proposal that we believe will result in unintended consequences if adopted. We want to make sure the council is aware of that. First, such a significant increase in the water SDCs will effectively preclude further residential development in the city. The proposal increases the water SDCs by 700%, and as your consultant indicated, will be the most expensive SDCs in the state of Oregon. Developers will not build in your community because the SDC rates will be cost prohibitive. And Allied's project is a perfect example of that. They've been at it for multiple years. They've invested a lot of time, money, and resources. And just the adoption of this will make it an easy decision for them to terminate that project. And since the city relies on SDCs, not just water SDs, but other SDCs to deal with its infrastructure needs, if there is no residential development in the city, you won't have those SDC funds to fund any of your major infrastructure improvement, and that will have major impacts on the city. Additionally, the city will have extreme difficulty satisfying the housing production requirements imposed by House Bill 2003. That was a measure adopted in 2019. It's going to require cities like you to establish goals and show that those production goals are being met. If you don't have development, you're not going to be able to meet those goals, and you're going to have to deal with state agencies for the fallout as a result of that. Second issue is that the SDC proposal is legally flawed for several reasons. It violates the SDC statutes, it violates the needed housing statutes, and it will constitute a violation of the takings clause under the U.S. Constitution. And the needed housing and taking arguments should be of particular concern to the city, because if parties were to successfully challenge the SDCs based on those arguments, the result would mean that you would not be able to impose the SDCs on development projects, and it could undermine the entire SDC system. And then what you would have is a situation where developers have a project, they challenge the SDCs. If they're successful, they build their project and all the impacts on the city, and you have no funding source to address those impacts. We believe that that scenario would be a disaster for the city, and you need to be concerned about taking an action today that could ultimately lead to that in the future. And finally, we believe that the city is going to miss out on unique opportunities for state funding to help defray the cost of these these infrastructure improvements. The state's been talking about the housing crisis for decades, but for the first time, the governor and legislature are getting serious about understanding the need for the help from the state to fund these infrastructure improvements. Governor Kotek is pushing Senate Bill 1537, which would provide upwards of $200 million in state funding for local infrastructure to support efforts to increase housing. Those state funding resources could provide the city a critical funding source to support its infrastructure improvements. But if you were to adopt SDCs that are this high, that would effectively preclude development, I can't imagine that the state would choose the City of Independence as a candidate. They're going to choose jurisdictions where they think the funding will actually lead to housing development. So our request is limited and straightforward tonight, and that is we're asking that the City Council postpone its decision for 90 days, as David indicated, and reconsider its options. We believe there are better options to explore before committing to this massive SDC increase. The Oregon legislature adjourns in 2 weeks, March 10th. You're going to know what those funding sources are going to be, and you're going to be able to explore that opportunity. You could consider graduated SDC increases that would enable developers to. Well, with those, I'll just wrap it up and say, we appreciate you considering our comments. We hope you really will pause. If you pause, you still have an opportunity to adopt this later. If you don't, then the ship has already sailed, and we hope you'll give some serious consideration to these comments. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Connors. Okay, we're going to go to testimony for people in the room. Chet Graham?
Mr. Mayor.
What city you're, I don't have your full address.
Chet Graham, 2755 James Howe Road, Dallas, Oregon.
Thank you.
I'm the principal broker of my own firm, Realty First Dallas. I'm the realtor that represents Brandy Meadows over here, which is an MX zone.
Right.
With mixed housing. The SDCs, I'd just like to, number one, I'd like to clarify who really pays the SDCs. The developer doesn't do it. Larry Dahlke does not pay the SDCs. The builders pay the SDCs. And they roll that over into the home prices as a hard cost to the citizens of Independence. That's who pays for the SDCs. So it's not some big billionaire guy. It's these individual people that back here. Okay, excuse me, take a breath. So far in our, I just did a quick little thing on my paper here. We've done 107 lots, and the SDCs that we've done so far for phases 1 and 2 have been over $1.5 million that we've brought to the city. In phase 3, I figure it's gonna be a little over 900,000, it's phase 3 and 4. In phase 5, if we go to phase 5, that's another 43 lots, and if we're able to go with a $33,000 SDC, which is outrageous as it stands, you know, that's gonna give you another, what did I say here? About another 1.4 million in SDCs. If we don't go forward, you won't get those SDCs. Since we've had our 107 lots that are phase 1, 2, and 3, we've brought in over $500,000 a year in tax revenue. You know, with these other 43 lots, that's gonna be another $250,000 a year in revenue that you won't have. You know, in my business, some money is better than no money. You know, the developers cannot go forward because we are not competitive. If you come out to my subdivision, I don't know how many people have been out there, you can see that I've had finished houses since August and no offers. We have a mixed variety of properties out there. We have fourplexes, we have duplexes, we have multi-generational houses, and Mr. Chair just now has finished our townhomes and row houses with a price point of $440,000, 1,500 square feet, beautiful. Thought that would bring in some activity. We have nothing. This SDC will kill us from going forward. I was also able to reach out to Chad Davis, who has that property over in Talmadge. He reached out to me a couple summers ago and asked how we were doing, what our lot prices were, and I was candid and told him where we're at. He was not aware of these SDCs going up, and he told me today that he won't be back. So now we won't have that property to connect into. Once we get a bridge across the creek into Jay's property, which would give us another outlet if we were to be able to go forward and develop up 13th to help with our traffic flow. So Mr. Dahlke and us, we've had a lot of thought of what we'd like to try to do here, but these SDCs are gonna kill us. Because houses have to sell in order to grow. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dahlke, Scott Dahlke from Salem. Oh. Good evening, welcome to the council meeting.
Thank you, Mayor. Scott Dahlke, reside at 491 50th Avenue Northwest, Salem, Oregon. I'm reading a letter on behalf of my dad, Larry. Here we go. Dear City Council, as a developer, I have appreciated the opportunity to contribute to the vibrant growth happening here in Independence. This is a unique place. You have definitely made growth a priority while maintaining the warm feeling of a close-knit community. Our company's previous construction phases demonstrate our commitment to this community. In turn, this growth has generated significant revenue and employment opportunities in Independence. But today, I am concerned about the potential consequences of repeatedly increasing system development charges and the effect it may have on the city. The proposed hikes in SDCs would be the third in just over a year. This seems to signal a discouraging shift that could severely impact the feasibility of future projects, including 43 lots that our company currently has ready for development. The proposed rate hikes make development less viable. It sends a message to developers, including me, that growth may no longer be a priority for the city. There are undeniably financial and infrastructural challenges facing Independence. These challenges cannot be overcome solely by imposing heavier financial burdens on developers. The approach deters future development and risks stalling the city's progress. I urge you to reconsider these measures and to engage in a more balanced, collaborative approach to infrastructure financing. It is imperative to find solutions that support development and growth without placing an unsustainable burden on those looking to invest in Independence. Thank you for considering my perspective. I hope you course of action that aligns with the best interests of Independence and its residents. Sincerely, Larry.
Thank you very much, appreciate it. Mr. Setniker.
Could I, wait, I got a lot of questions. You guys may answer my questions. Could I?
Sure, we can defer. That's fine. Mark Bybee. Good evening, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. My name is Mark Bybee. I'm president of Bybee and Associates in Salem. I'm a builder. I've been building here for the last 4 years in the city. I reside at 4480 Century Drive South, Salem. Did you get one of these?
You've been on them. I wanted to make sure that you.
This was just an SDC fee analysis that I drafted based on the data that I could gather from my own home building here since June of 2020. If you would, please pay attention to the 5 blue boxes in the middle, the vertical boxes there. Those reflect the SDC increases that I experienced as I passed these on to home buyers. In June, it went up 2.23%, the SDCs did from the previous month or so before that. I didn't have accurate numbers of what the SDCs were before this, but when I spoke with Ashley Lawrence this afternoon at the city, she said it was $15,500. So that went up to 2.23% when I built my first house here in Independence. Then in November 2021, it went up 0.3%. I don't know why I was charged just a few dollars more there. But the significant increase occurred in October of 2022, where we had a 10.39% increase in SDCs. Now, if you notice to the right of that, there's a running total. Now since 2020, we've increased the SDCs by 12.64%. And then in July of this year, or last year, we had a 57.75% increase in SDCs. It skyrocketed. And as a running total, just since I've been building here, that reflects a 70.38% increase. And now from my understanding is tonight, the city is proposing an increase of roughly $24,000, $22,000 to $24,000, which would be an 86.9% increase since the last 57% increase we've had, which leaves us with an unconscionable running total of 157% increase in SDC since I began building here. I made a call to Dallas, because I know Troy Skinner there in the building department and permits, and he's an inspector there as well. I asked him what his SDCs were at his city, and there's a box at the bottom of this form I gave you. And when I spoke with him regarding his SDCs, and I mentioned that Independence wants to increase their SDCs again, his comment was, we will be getting a lot of business soon from Independence. Their SDCs will hurt development in their city. Their SDCs are $14,713, and when you compare it on the very last column on the right, prior to any, if you don't increase the
Mayor, that's 5 minutes.
Independence SDCs are 46.69% higher than Dallas, and if we do this proposed increase, it'll be 71% higher than Dallas here. And it will kill us, and it will force us to, we just can't sustain it. In fact, I'm in the process of building a couple duplexes in Dallas now. I'm engaged in that because their SDCs are cheaper and their land there.
Thank you, appreciate it. Mr. Setniker, would you like to now, or you want to?
Yeah, I can.
Sure.
Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening and welcome.
Council. David Setniker, PO Box 338 in Independence, Oregon. I had a thing here I'm gonna say, but everything's been said. I agree with what David Hill and I think it was Mike Connors had to say. That they hit it pretty much right on the nose. Same way with all these folks. I am the owner of that property that we're talking about up there. Basically, I let them, I haven't been paid much of anything from any of these guys. They pay me when they finish the house. I'm sort of financing, which is fine, it's great. I want to do what's good for the city there, so I think we need to, table it like what he suggested for 90 days and see if it can't come to some kind of a more equitable approach. Because I agree with you guys, but they're going to walk, and you're not going to have anything, and that's fine with me. Because my business is farming, and I'll farm until I die. But the city, I realized, I loved the city 25 years ago. It was small, it was great, knew everybody. But the city wants growth, and it has to have growth. I understand that. And I listened to why you're having all these problems trying to annex this and annex that. This is all ready to go, but you guys are just trying to kill them. It's unworkable, all because of the water. Now, what's with the water? I know water and I know land, and I don't know, what is it, 40 million? I don't know, I've heard a lot of different numbers, but why can't we drill a well for short term or something where we don't have to make this huge expenditure? Because I don't think you have the rest of the, this should be like a regional project, not the city of Independence, but I don't think Monmouth wants to go along with it. I doubt if Dallas does. I've been on the Rickreall Water Board for years. They got plenty of water. I haven't heard about the wells going dry in this aquifer. I've got 30-some wells in the same aquifer as Independence, and all the Rickroll water comes off my property out of wells, and they're perfectly happy. They got plenty of water. So I mean, I'm throwing out the possibility, why don't we drill another well or two in the Band-Aid this until, you know, I realize that, you know, the growth is gonna have to step up, you know, and I'll be long gone, and a lot of us will be long gone before, but we gotta look out for our children and our grandchildren. So I would say maybe we got some other, step back and take a look at some other alternatives, so we don't kill the builders. Builders, you know, they're getting ready to go to polls. I just feel so damn sorry for them, you know. They've all been good people. I've known the doggies for, probably 30 years. They're a top-notch outfit, you know. They've got a beautiful development out there, so I don't know. I just go along with what David Hill and those are recommending. So, thank you.
Thank you for coming in. Okay, I think I go on my next thing on my script.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes?
Can I come up and talk? I didn't sign up, but may I come speak?
Sure.
Awesome, thank you.
You have a card you'll hand to Karen after?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let us know who you are, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. For the record, my name is Evan Source. I live at 1126 8th Street in Independence. And, you know, I wasn't planning on speaking, but, you know, I heard folks who lived in Scottsdale, Arizona, Dallas, Oregon, and Salem, Oregon come and talk about their concerns for ratepayers in Independence, but none of them actually paid the rates in Independence. I do. And so I might have a little different perspective, which is that you really have two choices here, because we need these increased capacities and increased facilities for our community. And excuse me, it's either going to become, it's either going to be funded through SDCs or it's going to be funded on my water bill. So I just want to, you know, lift up the voices of ratepayers in this city and lift up the voices of folks who've struggled to pay those rates for decades now. And just, you know, really want to encourage you all to think about the fact that builders are intuitively creative in how they do things. And I feel like through these SDC proposals, you can still work with builders to be creative, to come up with ways to reduce their burden to pay these SDCs. And I have full faith in this council and these builders that you'll figure out ways to do that. But to fund, if you're not gonna fund these projects for the new capacity that's gonna be put online from these buildings in SDCs, you're gonna fund it on the people already paying the rates, and I just wanna say that that's not fair. So thank you very much for your time, and I just appreciate all you do and your service to our community, so thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's go to staff comments in response to the testimony and clarifications. Mr. Fisher and friends.
How old is code?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to address a couple of comments from tonight and some of the comments from the letters that were received. And I know Ken is going to respond related to the legal aspects of it. I'm not an attorney. So as far as the Home Builders Association letter goes, they listed several projects in there, B1, B3, B5, 6, 9, 11, 12, 15, and 17. I'm going to throw out B3 because it was never included in the SDCs for capacity increasing projects. As far as B1 goes, that line, there's two ways to do this. You can upsize your existing pipes in your system to better get flow through the city, through the existing city lines to serve development. That's one way to do it. The other way is to build large transmission lines, kind of large backbone lines that feed a majority of the water through the city, not through the individual lines, but through the city to points where you're going to develop in the future, because they're going to have a higher demand on the system. The transmission is a high cost. That's like putting a 18-inch water line or a 12-inch water line down the entire length of the state highway, and then feeding other lines off of that as your primary backbone. Instead, what we did in the master plan is we utilized the existing system and targeted upsizing of certain lines so that in the water model, we could get enough flow through the entire system to serve the growth in those areas, okay? It's a much less costly alternative. So in these projects, B1 specifically supplies capacity for the north end of town. B5 supplies capacity for the north and west side of town. B6 supplies for north and west. B9, north and west. B11, south and west. B12, south, north, and west. B15 for the north. B17 for the north, and B18 for the north. If these are not included in there, you would be asking the ratepayers to pay for upsizing that serves the growth areas in the community. We went over this pretty extensively in a meeting with the Home Builders Association. We agreed with some of their assessments that several of the lines in there should not be included. We went through and we struck those out. I conferred with our consultant that put together the water master plan and did the modeling. He found a couple of other lines. We took those out. We put that package back together and we met with the Home Builders Association. They asked questions, but they didn't have anything to point to say this is wrong, okay? As far as looking at the remaining SDCs, the wastewater was set. That has already been pared down. That was a very lean master plan. That was an increase, I think, 99 or 9,800 for a single family home. That is a treatment plant upgrade. A majority of the cost is a treatment plant upgrade to serve the growth in the community. The parks and stormwater master plans, those are getting ready to get kicked off. We should start those in the next couple of months. We're going to look at those to see what projects need to be built and what projects can come out. I anticipate that at the end of those, there'll be an update to those SDCs. They may go down, they may go up. It depends on what the needs are for the community to supply stormwater and parks in the system. Transportation, we just did that. We went through it again, and we talked to the Home Builders Association about taking another look at it this fall, about projects that can be taken out there more in tune to be in the Parks Master Plan piece. And we're still committed to doing that. But it's gonna take time to do that. It's gonna require us to go back and do an update to our Transportation Master Plan. That's gonna have to go through the full process again, through Planning Commission and ultimately to City Council before I can go back and change transportation STCs. For the letter that was from Mike Connors, I just wanted to reiterate this, the 700% increase, that's because the city had not done an update to its water SDCs since 2004, 20 years. No increases, no inflationary increases, 20 years of nothing, which is why you see that big jump. And that's what we talked about in the work session, that if you do those incremental increases over time and keep your master plans up to date, you don't have these big jumps. The lion's share of the water system development charges is the water treatment plant. It's not replacing water lines out there, it's the water treatment plant. It's a very expensive plant to build, and it's gonna take years for us to build that. For the comments from the folks that spoke, I actually only had one, Mr. Setnicker spoke about a regional water treatment plant. The costs that are in this SDCs have no participation and no increases related to a regional treatment plant. This is only to build what we need for the next 20 years in Independence. It doesn't include any other partners and upsizing for those partners. Any questions?
Questions, presenter?
Yeah, I have a couple.
Councilor Court.
Steve, I think from your, if I understood your slide, the presentation, my notification went out that we were looking at this, correct?
Correct.
You need to push the button, please.
Sorry, thank you, Mayor. We had a work session, what, 4 weeks ago? It was 2
January
months ago?
9th.
Yeah,
January
it's
9th.
been quite a while. And to my recollection, the Home Builders Association rep was at that work session.
That's right.
But none of the.
Did not participate,
Right,
just
but
listen.
none of the builders, none of the brokers were there.
That's
correct? Okay. If, Gerald, if you were to implement a 90-day pause, as was suggested, what would you do with that time? What would you hope to gain from that time? Anything significant?
Well, in a magical world, the state would be able to issue us a grant to cover a majority of the cost of that plant, then I could lower the SDC impacts.
You couldn't do that in 90 days, though. You couldn't put a grant together and get it awarded in 90 days.
I haven't seen anything happen in 90 days with the federal or state government, sorry.
At the meeting that you and Kenna held, it was just with the Home Builders Association, it was not with any of the brokers or the builders?
And their consultants.
And who's a consultant?
The Home Builders Association had a consultant review our proposed plan, and
Is the Home Builders Association essentially a de facto lobbyist? Is that their role?
Not de facto, absolutely. They're an
Absolutely,
advocacy group,
okay.
that is their sole mission.
Okay, I just wanted to clear that up. Some money is better than no money, but we're already in a hole, already in a deep, deep hole. You know we have lots of costs we have to pay for. We don't have the means to raise that money ourselves, given the measures that we're subjected to. Is there any other alternative, Joe, besides putting it on the back of the ratepayer? No.
Well, is it possible to go on what she's saying?
Put your speaker on, sorry.
Go ahead, Councilor Roden.
And going along with what she's saying, if the city filed bankruptcy on all of our outstanding debt that we have, would that allow us to then spend money that we're spending on our debt to water treatment facilities that we would not then have to put on our builders?
That's actually a layup, really. Think of Detroit, Michigan. Think of Flint, Michigan. They filed for municipal bankruptcy. And guess what happened? A federal judge took over and raised your rates and said you will pay the rates to fix lead in your water system or supply in your system. You're simply taking local control away from you and putting it in the hands of a federal judge. That's what would happen.
I'm going to go back to Councilor Court. Did you have additional questions?
It just seems to me that a lot of the comments and issues are being raised today rather than 5 weeks ago when we started this process. And I would rather have people engaged in the process throughout rather than come at the last minute saying this is a stupid plan. I think we've done a lot of work on this, and I think it makes a lot of sense. Sorry, I know that was a comment.
All right, additional questions? Anybody else on this, questions on this, Councilor Morton?
2 questions. First of all, what damage would it do to the city's ultimate plans to wait the 90 days?
None, right now.
Okay, and the second question is, we heard a recommendation about drilling more wells. Is that cost effective or benefit effective?
So first we have to figure out where we're gonna drill the wells. we have to procure the land and hope that when we actually drill wells, that we can get water out of them. The other option is to buy existing wells near the city, but they also have to be ones that can be used for municipal use and not just irrigation, which gets you into a whole water rights exercise with the state.
And the Oregon Health Authority will have ultimate authority on what you can drill, how you can drill, and if you need it. So this is, what you were saying then effectively is our master plan is not valid anymore, and we're gonna go in a different direction, which seems counterintuitive to me, given the fact that you've invested so heavily, both in your time and your treasure in your master plan.
Additional questions from this side, Councilor Schwartz.
So Gerald, I guess this question is for you. Am I correct in summarizing that the concern, we have water to serve our current development?
Correct.
The concern community.
Yes, our current community.
Our current community, correct.
Under current growth rates, we'll have enough water till 2028.
Okay, so this is really looking at, the concern focuses on future development, houses that are not yet built, development that's not yet here. The concern is if we build it and aren't able to supply that with water.
Right. The other concern is that because it takes so long to get this going, to get a plant up and operational, you're gonna run out of water and probably still not be anywhere near having the plant completed. You might be finished with design by 2028. You might be started in construction, because we're going through a very long process that involves state permitting. It involves a surface water right and converting that to a groundwater right for the purposes of a water treatment plant. It's not a short process. It's not a year design and a year and a half construction. Right now, we're looking at worst case scenario construction might be done in 2030. I'm trying to accelerate that.
I have a couple questions. I don't want to preclude anybody else.
Councilor Joe Biden.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just had a couple.
Go ahead, Councilor, excuse
We
me.
have a timeline, right, for the water rights.
Mhm.
So that's part of the construction.
Yes, that's part of getting the treatment plant up. If we don't perfect those water rights or make progress on the water treatment plant, we won't get the extension that we need and jeopardize our access to those water rights.
Okay. And then, I know you said you think we have enough water till 2028. But I thought we discussed potentially it being more like 2025, like in the summer, having to do ration water and things like that.
So we're getting ready to build Hopewell 4, which will give us additional water, but that's the additional water that gets us to 2028, assuming that growth is going to continue. After that, when we start exceeding our ability to supply, that's when the water management and conservation plan goes into effect, and we start doing things like curtailing water hours, not being able to water your yard, issuing fines for people who are wasting water.
Washing their car.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions here. Okay, I think it's really clear, what's the impact if we don't raise the SDCs?
If you don't raise the SDCs, most all of it will be on the ratepayers.
And what we would do in that case, we would not necessarily triple your water rates immediately. What we do is we mortgage you even more. We would go and find 30-year money, and we will put that on the back of the ratepayer. And then your children and grandchildren would be on the hook for that as the stream of costs going into your revenue requirement. That's a valid argument that you may want to consider. I mean, you've heard the home builders say, you got to give us a break. So your last speaker said, keep an eye on the ratepayer. Maybe you want to raise your rates on your ratepayers so you can bring development in. That's a policy call that you want to think about. I don't know if that's what you want to do, but it's a digital world. the costs don't go away. Either we have growth pay for growth. If they don't, then ratepayers pick up the tab and subsidize growth.
Thank you. I have a couple more questions if I might. Okay, folks are talking that there will be an ending of growth, that no developers are going to build any more houses. That was what was suggested. Well, what will be the impact if all of a sudden there is no more growth? Or it's, how does this all work?
Let me take a shot first from an outsider looking in, and I've worked for you folks now for
a while.
Since we had black hair. What's gonna happen is she, over there, is gonna reprioritize infrastructure development. If growth stops, I think you pointed out over here that we have enough water to serve what we need now. But we're gonna throttle back on all of those growth projects that are on his master plan list. You're gonna throttle back on your expenditures to serve growth. You're gonna go operate and maintain what you've got as best you can without growth. And remember, you take in about $2 million a year in rate revenues on your system. The engine of your economy here, or your business, is your water and sewer infrastructure. You bring in a significant recurring stream of revenues. You're going to manage that better, and you're going to throttle back on your growth portfolio, is what's going to happen if growth stops. And that's a logical thing to do.
So if I could extend that question, and so that if there's no growth, but we still need to do the water treatment plant, otherwise we lose the water rights, is that correct?
Yes, it changes how we would approach it with the state and how fast we would roll it out. There are certain things that we have to do in order to get the extension, but if we can get the extension to buy time, then we'd have the ability to slow roll out the improvements into future years.
Okay, I have another question, and it might look over at our city manager, because I know she's had some additional conversations. One of the presenters was talking about a bunch of legal impacts, and that we may be at risk of some things like that. I think you told me before the meeting that you visited with our attorney, and would you care to respond to any to those? I'm sure that was probably on your list anyway.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, for that opportunity. And we can bring Joe or Steve or both of them back up.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So absolutely, Mayor, this is my part. It's not in either Gerald or Steve's wheelhouse. And I'm going to clarify for the people in the room and for the people who are listening. Many people know that my previous career was a litigating attorney, and I advocated for my clients. It's not what I'm doing here. What I'm doing here is I'm letting you all know what the facts are. I'm letting you know all of the information so you can make the best policy decision possible. So we did chat with our consulting attorneys, our contract attorneys earlier, and there is no law in place at this time that we are violating. There isn't. There's been a lot of speculation on what the legislature will do or what the case law might come down, but it's speculation. And I know you heard me say it many, many times. We don't speculate. Right? This is not what we do when we look at facts. House Bill 2003 requires the city to create a housing production strategy within 1 year of completing a housing capacity analysis. We call that a housing needs analysis. We just completed the HNA. We received a grant for the housing production strategy, and we are in contract discussions with the contractor. We are on time. SDCs don't play a role in House Bill 2003. We're doing what we need to do. We're following the rules. We're following the laws. ORS 197-307 sub 4, which is cited in that letter, limits standards, conditions, and procedures regulating the development of housing. SDCs do not regulate the development of housing. In fact, ORS 223-314 specifically states that the establishment, modification, or implementation of SDCs is not a land use decision pursuant to ORS 195, 197, and 197A. It's my understanding that developers have tried this argument previously and have been unsuccessful in those attempts. The allegation that the proposed water SDC increases violate ORS 223-307-1 sub 1 and sub 2 are simply put incorrect. Gerald just explained why. We met with the home builders. We explain why we are utilizing the system in place, it's cheaper. If they want us to go more expensive, sure, we could raise SDCs even higher. We tried to keep them down as low as we could. That's why we went that route. And finally, I'll just note that alleging SDCs are an unconstitutional taking has been unsuccessfully raised previously here in Oregon. Yes, they're talking federal, but it's been raised. We're so far ahead of everywhere else. We're unconcerned about that allegation. Now, while I'm up here, I also want to see, first and foremost is jurisdictions that provide water, sewer, stormwater, transportation, and park infrastructure. We have a clear mandate to provide sufficient capacity for planned development. You've heard me say it, developers have heard me say it, builders have heard me say it. It would be unconscionable to move forward with building so many homes without a plan on how to provide water. We have a plan. Some of the other things that have been talked about tonight, I'll kind of touch on. You know this, and I'm going to reiterate this just so that the folks at home know. So many of our SDCs are really based on the capital improvement projects needed to serve the growth expected for the city, right? Each city is different. Some cities have no growth, so they don't need to increase their SDCs. Some have slow growth, so they don't need to increase their SDCs as much. Some have sufficient infrastructure for their growth, whether fast or slow. So they don't have capital improvement projects. They don't have the need for a water treatment facility. Some cities are growing, but they haven't updated their master plans, so they don't know what the capital improvement projects are, so they don't increase their SDCs. We did that, right? 2004 was the last time we updated. Other cities are right there. They're right there. So comparing city to city SDCs, Steve does it as well as he can, but it's apples and oranges. Independence is one of the fastest growing cities in the state at this time. We don't have sufficient water capacity for the growth. Our master plans, Gerald told you, we just recently updated them in 2023. Prior to that, we were 20 years behind. So trying to compare, you just can't do it. You just can't do it. You have to look at what this city needs. Now, finally, there's been speculation that there's good potential that the city will receive funding from the state, or that the state will obviously not fund our infrastructure requests. Again, I don't like to speculate, but because it was raised, I'll speculate. The fact that there's a $200 million infrastructure funding, that's a drop in the bucket. That is a drop in the bucket. There are millions upon millions upon millions, and potentially into the billions of infrastructure projects that need to be done in this state. I think it's ludicrous to believe that there's a good potential that the state is going to give our city, as much as I love our city, they're going to give us 15% of that, they're going to give us $30 million and leave the other cities out. I don't think it's going to happen. That's my speculation. I hope we get a piece of it. And we have been really good at getting grants, and we will do that. We will continue to look at grants. We will continue to look for ways to get money. And again, I'm speculating because we're in the realm of speculation here. I actually think in this speculation that the loss of a large housing development would actually provide an excellent reason for the state to give us money. Because if we could build that water treatment facility, we wouldn't have to raise our SDCs, right? If we had the money, we wouldn't have to raise it. I think it's a great story. Again, my speculation, my opinion. And I talk about grants, and we have been really fortunate. You'll hear me talk about that later. If we get grants, if we get the funding, we can reassess the SDCs at that time. But we can't speculate that we're going to get those grants. But if we do get them, we can reassess the SDCs. Does that answer your question? And then some?
Thank you. Additional questions, since I have city manager sitting in front of us? Thank you very much.
Actually, I have one. Yes,
Please,
ma'am.
Councilor Roder.
Is it possible to get more bids on the water treatment plant that we want to install to see if we can make it cheaper as well?
It hasn't gone out to bid yet. Councilor Gerald, would you like to answer that for me?
So we just had our kickoff meeting for design with the consultants on Monday. The very first thing that I said is we are not going to be building a Taj Mahal water treatment plant. We're going to be building a very utilitarian, industrial style water treatment plant with no fluff, because frankly, this community can't afford it. We're going to build what we need at a minimum to get us up and operating. And I think they heard that loud and clear. There's more work to be done, and I'm going to continue to put the thumb screws to it to keep the costs down.
Thank you, appreciate that. Unless there's objection, I'm going to close the public hearing.
And the record.
And the record, sorry,
Hey, Mr. Mayor, can I add something or not?
Short. I'm going to give you a really short one.
Well, I'll just throw this out. I've got the city mom.
Come again?
I don't know who's speaking, or I.
David Sednecker.
You have to go to the microphone.
I'm sorry, sir. Mayor, do you want coming in?
He's going to be very brief.
I'm gonna be very brief. I'm just throwing this out here. I've let City Mamas, Rick Roll, everybody drill wells on my place, and independents can come down and drill well on my place too. I don't care. Free of charge, as long as it doesn't affect my farming. I've also got 3 wells that Mamas drilled on my place just north of your ball fields, and they're all capped. It's been pumped. They've all been there. There's cap. They just went a different direction. So I just told that, I'm just offering that up.
Thank you, and I appreciate with the generosity that you're exhibiting. I didn't say that very well, but thank you we're all working for solutions.
Yes.
So without objection, I'm closing the hearing and the record. Thank you. Okay, counselors, what do we want to do? We have
Looking for a motion there?
Sure, you know, we're gonna talk about it one way or another, so let's just put the resolution on the table, and we're gonna talk together. Go ahead, Counselor
I
Court.
move to adopt resolution 24-1600.
I have a motion,
Second?
and a second by Martin Willis. Now for discussion. For people, anybody want to say anything?
I'll start by saying I really appreciate the amount of feedback that we've gotten from people. This is a process that we've been working on for quite a while with the work sessions and other things. I don't like being in this position. I don't think any one of us do. We're just faced with having to make some very, very difficult choices. I do respect that we need to have an eye towards development and balancing that with how do we pay for that, and whether that's hopeful thinking that we could get some sort of funding. I mean, fingers crossed, we will try for it. But also recognizing that our neighbors, the people that live here, we have to answer to them as well. It's difficult, we're in a very tough situation, but we also have to be realistic and thoughtful about how we develop and making sure that we can provide utilities to them.
Councilor Roden.
I said in the January 9th meeting, this wasn't gonna work. This isn't gonna pencil out. We're gonna have to come back and talk to you at some point. I am in agreement with the builders that if we raise these systems development charges so high, we're just not gonna be able to build. And I think that's a tragedy. And I think that if we would have planned better in the future, we wouldn't be in this spot now, but here we are. But this isn't blindside to us. I said it, I'm sure there's at least one of the counselors who said it too. This isn't gonna work. This is a failed plan, and we're not gonna get the money to be able to fund this $10 million project that at the last city council meeting, the council voted in. So I'm sad that we're in this spot, but we have to look at what's best for the ratepayers. I honestly think it's gonna get on them anyway, so we're in a spot.
Councilor Morton.
I also appreciate that this is a living, breathing example of the democratic process. And I don't like this kind of decision any more than what the other counselors care for it. But I also hear that the ratepayers are already burdened with rather large water rates. I don't want to see the burden there get any bigger than it needs to be. I'm encouraged by the fact that we have satisfactory supplies for where we are right now. We all heard that if there's money that comes down the pipe and we get it in order to help defray some of the costs of building the water treatment plant, we all heard the staff say SDCs can be reduced. We're not going to forget that.
Can we make an amendment to the motion saying that specifically, Mayor?
We could, but I would suggest that, because we can come back to it at any time in the future, and let's not lock ourselves in. Additional comments over here? I'm gonna make a comment is, I'm sensitive to the ratepayers because they're the folks that are here now. And I don't think it's, we have to pay for this one way or another, and I don't think it should fall on the ratepayers. Anything else?
I guess I agree with everybody up here. None of us want to do anything because we are in a spot. And it's really painful. It's really painful we have to make these decisions. I feel for the ratepayers, for the builders and developers, people just wanting to get in and have affordable housing that's already high prices, and we're just going to be raising those prices if we get anybody to build. But the ratepayers, I don't know if it started with MINET, but the MINET debt was put on the ratepayers through the water bill, and we just keep raising it. And there's a lot of people who've said it before that they don't even, shower every day in Independence because they can't afford the water here. So just to continue to just gouge them, can't do it.
Okay. We have a motion on the table. All in favor of the motion, pass the resolution, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. We're going to keep moving forward. We have some other items to move forward with. We have an OLCC renewal. And Chief, are you doing this one? Yes. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Tonight we are doing some OLCC liquor license renewals. Each year, the OLCC provides the city with a list of establishments within the city that have requested renewal of their annual liquor license. We conducted thorough scans of reports for calls for services involving each of the listed establishments that are up for renewal. And that analysis showed that there were no disqualifying items found. So we are recommending approval for all of the annual renewals.
I move to recommend approval of all liquor licenses upon receipt of city fees.
And I second
I have
that.
a motion, second discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Let's go with the building inspection services, Ms. West.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, may I close this door so I can?
Sure.
I apologize, Mayor, I'm pulling up, I believe I have two in a row, if I recall
Yes,
correctly.
you have several.
And since the microphone is not working, I don't even want to touch that thing. Okay, the intergovernmental agreement between Independence and Monmouth Building Inspection Services. It's rather a formalization of what we've kind of been doing informally. We've been sharing services with Monmouth. We talked a lot about, we don't have a lot of depth of staff. And because we're so close and work so closely together, our building inspectors have been backing each other up. This IGA formalizes that agreement. And
Great.
nothing more than that.
Any questions? It's very straightforward. This is the motion.
Just a comment that I'm always going to be in favor of anything that is a collaborative effort between the two cities.
Was that a motion?
I move that the council authorize the city manager to sign the IGA with the city of Monmouth for building inspection services on behalf of the city of Independence.
Second.
I have a motion second by Coeur. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Motion carries. Are you ready? Is it?
Is it Sean, is it USDA?
Yeah, yes.
Sean.
And we're gonna do a USDA Business Development Grant. And I think Mr. Councilor Schwartzler wanted to make a statement before we deal with this.
Yes, I would like to recuse myself from this decision. I do not personally benefit from the discussion, but a business associate of mine does, and therefore I don't want there to be a conflict of interest.
Thank you. Mr. Irvine.
Great, thank you, Mayor and Council. What I've got in front of you tonight is a resolution requesting approval to apply for a USDA Rural Business Development Grant. This would support technical assistance and programming for food-based businesses, working in collaboration with India Idea Hub. And Councilor Schwartzler happens to be a employee of India Idea Hub, which is why she recused herself there. In this situation, we would be the fiscal agent, and India Idea Hub would be the organization that implements the grant and also provides matching funds. This is something we do periodically. We actually currently have this situation, an active situation with we're the fiscal agent for a grant for Polk Community Development Corporation as they're implementing a support program for low-income homeowners. We've also worked a number of times in the past with Merit, which is a microenterprise development organization. We were the fiscal agent, and then they implemented microenterprise development programs within the community. So we also actually worked with India Idea Hub and this exact grant a few years ago to support development of a shared use commercial kitchen with wraparound technical assistance programming. That program has actually supported about 32 entrepreneurs since the kitchen opened in May of 2021. 4 of those have opened brick and mortar businesses, 3 went on to open food trucks, 14 are currently operating their businesses out of that shared kitchen. So it's been a great success. This grant would actually expand upon the technical assistance portion of that previous project, enabling one-on-one technical support for food-based business owners, while also creating a complementary series of events and classes and other types of programming. Any food-based business would be eligible for support with this program, not just kitchen users. So I think that's important to users of that shared kitchen facility, so as to be available for any food-based business. The grant would largely fund the salary of the kitchen manager, which is an existing position that works with food entrepreneurs to help them strengthen their businesses and develop them. Additional funds would go towards acquiring resources like specialized software, paying for food and drink for events and classes, things like that. It would not, as we said, even though Ms. Schwartzler recused herself, none of the grant funds would go towards funding her position or anything directly benefiting her. And India Idea Hub would contribute any necessary matching funds. While the city would not be contributing matching funds, we would be administering the grant as the fiscal agent. This is a grant that we're familiar with, having implemented it one time before, and so I'm pretty comfortable with the small amount of staff time that these quarterly reports would require. The India Idea would do most of the work generating the metrics. We just fill in the forms and submit them. This grant does allow you to claim a portion of the award to offset administrative costs, but they also give you 5 additional points in scoring if you do not use grant funds to pay for grant administration. So in this situation, knowing the pretty minimal amount of staff time that's going to go into that, I would rather not claim that small amount of funds from the grant and instead get the 5 additional points, because I would not want the trade-off of potentially losing the grant by not getting those extra points. So in summary, this is a great way to provide support for early stage food-based businesses within the community, help us continue to expand and diversify the local economy, create more jobs, more revenue for community members. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions to the speaker? Hearing none, this is an action item.
I move to approve resolution 241599, authorizing application to USDA for a rural business development grant, and authorize the city manager or designee to sign the grant award contract.
I have a motion second by Martin Willis. Discussion.
I don't see the value in this. I didn't see this kitchen operate enough to sustain a $100,000 grant. It never operated sufficiently, I thought, in the past. When they did classes before, They taught kids to make a salad, and I thought, that can't cost thousands of dollars to do. So I'm not in support of this. It's still taxpayer money, even though it's coming from the USDA grant.
Okay, so
the idea
Councilor Schwarzler owns the idea of LLC.
Oh, I thought you said she was an employee.
Well, so she is the, I'm forgetting her exact title, but she is an employee. So in the Commons is an LLC that operates the co-working facility, and the Cherokee's Commercial Kitchen. Indie Idea Hub is a nonprofit organization that provides microenterprise support services.
But she owns both.
And it's not.
She owns, well, so the LLC she owns, the nonprofit can't be owned, but she is a employee of the nonprofit.
She created the nonprofit.
well, and I guess I'm in a somewhat unique position. My sometimes employer has actually had a space within Indy Commons since its inception at its prior location. And so in that move to its now current location, I actually had the opportunity to watch that USDA grant, the purchase of equipment that then was installed in the kitchen. And I've watched a number of the businesses actually that you referenced, some of which have moved on to brick and mortar or food trucks, and to see them come in and utilize that kitchen on, an hour, so many hours a week, and watching that group of local entrepreneurs networking with one another and seeking out advice through the Indie Idea Hub and consultants that do come in. They have, marketing Mondays. So I've seen, I guess, so much more than, and I'm not sure what you're referencing, somebody teaching kids to make salads. I've watched businesses operate out of that space on a day-to-day basis and move on to be independent, standalone businesses. So I would say it's been well worth every dollar of grant money that has been invested in the project. It's been amazing for our community.
Great.
Wait, one more question. Should that have been a declared conflict of interest? No. But her employer utilized that space.
Rents a space.
Just like anyone else, Counselor, it's not an issue.
She's not a shareholder.
Right. I do not benefit financially from
My question,
them renting the space.
I'm sorry, Kathy.
No.
My question is, if we don't apply for $100,000 grant, another applicant's gonna apply for it. So, I think sometimes you have to take the money to force the concept, to further the concept. And I think there's been some great movement in the kitchen area, and I think really what it needs to take off smartly is exactly what's asked here, is the technical assistance kind of stuff. I think that will definitely do something for it.
I agree with that.
How do we pick, which business, I guess? How do we do that when we're looking at grants? So if there's another business downtown that say is a different company, how do we get them a grant? Or do you actively go out to everybody downtown, or?
Well, so in this case, we work with nonprofits. Nonprofits are really the only ones that can typically receive grants. COVID notwithstanding, that was, that screwed up a lifetime of teaching that businesses generally can't get grants. But for the most part, nonprofits are the organizations that can receive grants. I'm always interested in partner organizations that are looking to do stuff. Like I said, the Local Community Development Corporation, we're talking to a childcare organization that wants to potentially work with us to be fiscal agent for a grant to help them develop additional childcare facilities within the community. So it's just a question of,
that would be great.
Yeah, so it's just a question of, I'm going out talking to people, I'm looking for people to come talk to me. Sometimes there's a fit, sometimes there's not. In a lot of cases, we try to have the organization be the applicant, but in some grants, in some situations, it just doesn't work out.
I think, John. I think sometimes nonprofits, particularly small nonprofits, are unaware of the fact that the city is interested in helping them do this kind of stuff. And I think they're a little intimidated maybe to come to the city. Can you tell me, let's say a small nonprofit starts up, they want to start some kind of project, some kind of process in the city. It's not necessarily beneficial to the city, but would you still be interested in talking to people like that?
I'm always interested in talking to organizations like that, especially if they're startups. You know, it's kind of like a business. Many places don't like to give grants to a startup organization. In some cases, then the city can help as a fiscal agent, and so in other cases, it doesn't work. But yeah, I'm always happy to talk, offer folks advice on how to continue to grow the organization, position themselves for things like that.
Council Road.
It leaves a bad taste in my mouth when it's Independence, the Indie Hub, that continually gets the grant money. And now that we have a counselor who represents that, I just think it's odd that that business seems to get a good focus of our attention when we have 2040 goals that go out to a much broader community, and it seems to be focused on one address in Independence. I think it's alarming to me.
But the only thing we're required to do is identify the conflict and recuse ourselves. Correct. We're required to do. Correct.
Right. Okay. Councilor Martin.
Thank you. The good thing about grants is when a community gets grants, it raises their profile for getting more grants for more things in the future. And grants can also be parlayed into matches and can encourage people that are grantors to do the last mile funding and so on. So any grant actually helps all people who are looking for grants.
Make a comment that the city has been very responsive in working with nonprofits who are interested in moving this community forward in a number of different organizations and nonprofits. And as Sean said, nonprofits that have approached him, they've worked with them on a variety of different projects. Unless there's further discussion, I'd like to move this forward. Someone make a motion, please?
There wasn't a motion.
I'm sorry, I apologize, I lost my place. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Roden is opposed. Motion carries. Ms. West, you have the final item?
Thank you.
I'll wait for Councilor Schwarzman to return. We seem to be talking about grants a lot tonight. This is a discussion about renewing the professional services contract for our grant coordinator. We would ask for your authorization for me to execute that contract. As you know, I'm just going to do the background very quickly. In 2021, we entered into a 2-year professional services contract with our current coordinator, Marshall Guthrie. Based on that, the success of that, we would like to continue the contract. Our Human Resources Director contacted 3 different individuals who could provide, and organizations, who could provide that particular service. There were 2 who responded. After a thorough review, we determined that Mr. Guthrie is best able to provide the services and has the requisite skills, abilities, and experience to successfully provide the grant coordinator services to us. Now, a part of that is because for the last 2 years, he has been on contract with us, and he has been successful in bringing in a number of grants. I'm going to go through a number of them because we have a $4 million award for the Independence Water System upgrades from the EDA. If we didn't get that award, then our ratepayers would be paying. We have a $500,000 grant for the Independence Wastewater System upgrade from Business Oregon application. Same story there. We have a $125,000 award from the COPS grants. We have an $800,000 federal direct spending for Corvallis Road, which we're waiting on the federal budget, but it's made it all the way to the end if they would just get it done. We have a $500,000 federal directed spending for Chestnut Ridge, again waiting on the federal budget. We have a $320,000 award from Rural and Tribal Assistance Pilot Program. The Oregon VLCD funded our housing planning assistance and housing production strategy. Those for the consultant that helps us with those. We have a $200,000 award for the Alpha House from the Oregon Main Street 2023 grant, and that's where we worked with another member of the community, and they received a $200,000 award to do some work on that particular building. We have a $20,000 award for the water treatment facility design. Again, without that award, our ratepayers will be paying for that. We have a DOT Thriving Communities, which is paying for the technical assistance
And we're looking at the Central Town Legislative Arterial Plan, which is a non-cash technical assistance grant. In addition to the above, we received notification late last week of an award of an additional $50,000 grant that will help to finance a general fund project that I can't talk about yet, but you will get the exciting news in March when we can talk about it. So in total, Mr. Guthrie's brought in over 6.5 million. I kind of did the math. He could work for us for 65 years, and then he could reach that 6.5 million amount. And that's just in 2 years.
Questions for the presenter?
I have a question. How many of these grants did he do by himself? Because I thought you and the mayor got the 500,000 from the federal to the Chestnut Street Bridge from Representative Evans, and I think Sean does a lot of work too. Does he?
So the 500,000, we got multiple actually grants. So we received $2 million. 2 million, Mayor, from Representative Evans. 500,000 is from the congressional directed spending. And it is often a team, everything we do is team, everything. So when Marshall creates the grant applications, some of them are extraordinarily complex. He does almost all of the writing. I think, Sean, we give him some of the project description, Gerald gives him some of the project description, gives the numbers, but the creation of that grant application is pretty much all Marshall. The getting it in on time, the making sure we get all the documents attached, because some of them have a ton of documents. And then the added bonus is when we get the grant, some of these are, the reporting is terrifyingly massively huge. The EDA is going to be quite difficult. Normally, I would have to do that, or Sean would have to do that. Marshall does that. And that allows us to do other things for our community that are important. So it is teamwork, but he does almost all of the writing and processing and recording.
Councilor Joe.
Couple questions.
Yes.
This is for 1 year.
2 years.
It's for 2 years, okay. My other question, I know I'm being petty, but can we renegotiate the contract? Because originally it was a grant, now we're gonna be paying for it out of city funds, right?
So we could, but that is the going rate, and we probably would for grant.
For grant writers.
For grant writers, yes. And you pay for what you get, right?
But I mean, so you can't negotiate anything, you can't negotiate for $9,960 less.
Well, potentially I could, but.
I don't want to touch the general fund, I mean,
We're going to touch the general fund.
no matter
It's
what.
going to happen because we talked about.
Well, it says here, that's all that would come out of.
But we're going to have to touch the general fund in some way. Because remember, let's go all the way back to budget about a year ago. We talked about best practices and allocations and how we have to allocate the personnel based upon what fund they're working for. You notice most of those grants are water, sewer, streets, right? Okay, so that's mainly allocated to water, sewer, and streets. But a little bit of it is general fund. The COPS grant is general fund. Any work that is for the museum, the library, the parks, all general fund. So a little bit has to be general fund. So we can negotiate down 10,000, but there's still gonna be money coming out of the general fund because 10 years. Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Are we okay? If this is an action item, please.
I move that council authorize the city manager to execute a professional services agreement with Marshall Guthrie on behalf of the city of Independence.
Second.
Motion second by Morton. Discussion. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Council.
Announcements, please.
March 8th is My Story Night 2, which will be happening at Brew at 7 o'clock at night. Come and hear 8 local authors who you didn't even know were writers read some of their pieces there. It was a very fun My Story Night #1. This one's going to be even better.
I neglected in my mayor report to give a couple of updates. I want to do that. Last week, I had the pleasure of being on a panel with the mayor of Salem, mayor of Kaiser, and the mayor of Albany. There were well over 100 people there at the Mid-Valley Association of Realtors. And so we spent an hour and a half talking about our communities, and pretty exciting stuff. As you know, a number of cities like what we're doing in Independence, and Sean Irvine and I had a chance to given a little tour of of our community and how things were done with the city of Scioto. They were, you know, it's one of the things that people can see small communities can do stuff and they get motivated. It lifts all boats. It's a totality. And then finally, this last week, I attended the League of Oregon Cities Board of Directors meeting. We talked extensively about some legislative issues, ballot measure 110, recreational immunity, water infrastructure, and long-term funding for cities. And as you all get the LOC newsletter digest, so you can read more detail about all of those, but the short session is percolating along. So unless there's objection,
Adjourn.
we're adjourned.
Thank you, council.
Doors open at 5.